Sound is conditioned and responsible.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our May 13th, 2025 Board of County Commissioners 9 a.m. board briefing meeting. It is Tuesday. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present. Commissioner French just stepped out for a moment, but he is here. So we will go ahead and get started. We're starting this morning with the sheriff, myself, and Commissioner Chris Jordan. So I'm going to let Chris Jordan take
You're good with me being the blabbermouth?
I am.
You'll jump in. Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the sheriff being here as well. This is, we do have Emily Cameron for DSP present as well, if there's questions for her. But this is a proposal to convene a task force called the Safe and Healthy Spokane Task Force in partnership with the City of the Valley and the City of Spokane. And there's 3 documents attached with the agenda item. We have a proposed jurisdictional letter that's being presented to the Valley Council tonight. City of Spokane probably next week, I would guess. And there's an attachment, which is a roster of the planning team members, as well as some characteristics of potential task force members. And then this proposal is coming to us with the support of a coalition of business, nonprofit, health leaders that have been in conversation over a number of months since visiting Whatcom County last year. So there's a 3rd attachment, which is a letter of support from those folks. So just as a reminder, Commissioner Cuny and Emily and I spoke at last year's Council of Governments. You want to come up?
Emily, come.
Come on. Step right up. So we gave a little update at Council of Governments last year about a visit that GSI, DSP, Valley Chamber, and Empire Health hosted last year at their invitation to go to Whatcom County. And we talked through some of the lessons from that at the COG, but just as a quick reminder, Whatcom County went through 2 unsuccessful ballot measures related to their jail before passing a successful measure in 2023 with broad support across the community. And that addressed both programs in the criminal justice system, as well as improving their detention facilities. So lots of lessons learned from that trip, but just a few of them that I'll speak to is they convened a regional task force that was a diverse group of people, had a lot of expertise, and also people outside the system that crafted a 15-point action plan for the community to make the community safer. They had a lot of diverse perspectives at the table, very robust public input through that process, and then they developed this regional framework that the county and the cities in Whatcom County had agreed to before they went forward with the ballot. So since that visit, the coalition partners have continued to host these kind of informal dialogues and conversations. A lot of it has been debriefing what we learned from Whatcom County and also kind of educating the community leaders about our system. So there were some jail tours that were arranged. A lot of people in this coalition hadn't seen the state of the jail and Geiger, tours of the Crisis Stabilization Center. So in some ways, one of the things we've learned is that on the program side, we're doing a lot of good things here in Spokane County already. But what Whatcom County was able to do was pull together a regional plan based on the unique needs of their county. So through that process of ongoing dialogue, this proposal is kind of the consensus next step for us to recommend to the county and to the cities. And I think it reflects a recognition of a couple things as I see it. One is fentanyl crisis is exacerbating the public safety issues that we all see. I think we've all recognized there are major challenges with the state of our facilities, both detention and then the need for treatment facilities. And I think it's a recognition that we need to work together as a region wherever we can for a safer and healthier community, and the public really needs to see that happening. So you have the proposal in front of you, just a few quick highlights on it. I think really importantly, the private sector nonprofit partners who've been convening this, are committed to provide consultants to support the work and really provide some of that muscle. We can't just put everything on our staff. We've got a lot of things to do, so we'll get some outside help from them. The current thought is that that consultant would be kind of housed in a foundation, nonprofit. That would be the GSI Spokane Area Business Foundation at the moment. That's the thought. Several specific areas of work that we've envisioned for the task force. One is a needs assessment, and that is building off of the work that Mike just did with the Sims exercise out at the casino, which I thought was really great. And the city's also done a recent mapping exercise. And really kind of taking a look at what are the gaps and what are the things that are working really well that need to be scaled. Another piece is updating old studies. We don't necessarily want this group to reinvent the wheel because there has been past efforts like the Blueprint for Reform, Justice Task Force that have made recommendations, but none of those have occurred since really the heat and the prime of the fentanyl crisis. So it's really timely to get those documents dusted off and see what still applies today. Another one is broad public input. Another one is looking at really specific areas of the system. Those are listed in there. Finding out if there's recommendations that we could all look to implement. Another piece is operating transparently, having public meetings, a website, issuing reports, and making regular updates, which is really important. Another piece is looking for opportunities to leverage funding, not just the possibility of a future ballot measure, but what are the other ways that we can look at the needs and find creative ways to fund them, whether that's is there a role for private dollars? Is there a Medicaid waiver possibility? Are there other state dollars we could go after that we haven't considered so far? And then the last piece I think is, it's basically a charge to give us actionable recommendations that don't require new funding. If there's things we can do today, let's consider that. And it's all about this action plan that we hope to be delivered in the spring of 2026. So a deadline-driven group. I'm using the phrase deliberate urgency because we do recognize you have to have a deliberate, thoughtful action plan, but you also need to move given the urgency of the issues. So a couple last kind of comments and I'll turn it over to others. There's currently envisioned that there would be a multi-jurisdictional, multi-sector planning team that would guide the task force, make sure it stays on the practical and the doable, and give some general direction. And that list of folks has some county, has some city, has some business and some nonprofit. That's in your materials, and would also kind of select the task force members after receiving input from you all, from the public. So that's something we're looking for. If you have specific ideas of who should be at that table, to share that. There is a second prong of this work. There's a task force, and then there's kind of a more specialized work group on facilities piece to really dive into the details of looking at our past studies on jails, really having a robust conversation about what are the opportunities to modernize facilities, taking some kind of strategic input from the task force on what's needed, but then kind of diving into some details on that. I will just direct your attention to the letter from the community partners, which includes the organizations I mentioned, as well as the Spokane Business Association, Vista, Washington Trust. We've had great engagement from health entities. Multi-Care and Providence are signed on. Chaz, they really see a lot of common interest with what their experience with behavioral health and the emergency room, I think, as we all know. We've also had, Empire Health Foundation and more kind of advocacy focused people. So it's a pretty broad coalition frontier. There's behavioral health, so we can take a look at that. But the letter does say that they write to express their full and unified support for the formation of the Safe and Healthy Spokane Task Force and urge elected leaders across the jurisdictions to endorse and prioritize its advancement. And with that, I'll just turn it over to others to add anything I missed or correct me.
I don't know that you missed anything or needed correction on anything. I will say that from my perspective, after talking to many people in the community, business leaders and other elected officials, after our last push for Measure One, I was very surprised at the number of people who didn't really understand the details of the proposal. I thought we were proposing was a good solution to some of the problems. However, it became evident to me following that there were a lot of people who had no information, misinformation. And I think with the way that we have put this coalition together, I think there's going to be a lot of people putting information out very early to make sure that we educate as many members of the public as possible about the challenges we face, about the current state of the criminal justice system and the healthcare systems. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of the public is keenly aware of the challenges that our healthcare systems are facing right now, largely due to the fentanyl crisis. And really the challenges we face as elected officials to provide the services that the public expects. And I'm very hopeful that this group will be able to push a plan kind of over the finish line here in the next 18 to 20 months. I think that would be fantastic for us to manage that. And I think this is the best way to get everybody on the boat instead of being, bifurcated between different cities in the county and everything like that. I think this is a way to get everybody on board and say to the public, this is what has to happen.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Emily speak to it.
Sure. I'll just maybe echo what you've already heard, and that is the idea here was to be a true cross section of the community. You had business, I call it the three legs of the stool. So you had the private, public, and nonprofit sectors coming together to look at what is truly a challenge that intersects so many parts of our community. And I think it's intentional that we are calling it a safe and healthy task force, understanding that being safe is a determinant of health and vice versa. And how do we make sure that we're looking at this from a comprehensive approach, but also a very urgent approach, because we know that this is something that is affecting every single member of the community, and whether coming from the business community like myself, or another part of the community, this is something that has touched all of us, and really felt that one of the greatest lessons we learned actually in Whatcom County, and I will admit going to Whatcom County didn't expect this to be big lessons, was you got to put everything on the table and you've got to bring everyone to the table. And I think that this approach is really trying to carry that through in Spokane.
Yeah, I think it was, when I went to Whatcom County with the group, it was, talking to them and listening to them and taking the tour of their stabilization center and seeing, we didn't tour their jail facility, but, again, built the same time as ours, same situation. My takeaway was we need to come back, and that's why we did the tours of the jail, so people could actually see what was going on, because we're doing some things, our stabilization center is way better, set up a lot differently and done well. The jails are the same, so it's not, that much difference. And so people could then see what was really going on in our jail. So Mike, thank you for helping to set those up. Because I think how many tours have there been? Like 10?
How many?
Tours have happened.
Oh,
Yeah. So we've really been working to, educate the community as to what the state of our facility is and why it's needed. As part of that. And so this is, just, I think us trying to figure out how do we best, come up with a plan that will pass the next time we put it forward to the voters, because we need to. Whatcom County had it failed twice, and the third time was when they did this and had it pass. We can talk about details or not details or any of that, but it really was the education that was going on in the community by the people that were sitting at the table that were going back to their groups and talking about this word. And everybody didn't agree on everything. But in the end, all the cities were on board with Whatcom County. They'd all signed on that they were committing their dollars to Whatcom County for 4 to 6 years or 5 to 6 years to figure out, paying down on the construction. You know, so it's not just the community members, but it's also getting the electeds to go. If we've got the, you know, the city's already taken 1%, the valley's looking at taking 1%. But how do we have them then all come together? We start to figure out what that's gonna look like on a cost, because it's gonna cost us all. We, you know, it's whether it's charged out or not, it's part of it. So those were the things that we took away and wanted to figure out what to do here. So this has just been planning sessions and discussions and all of that. And so now we're coming back to each of the jurisdictions to see if everybody's willing to, you know, put forward a formal task force to do this. And I think everyone knows that it's still the county's responsibility to put this on the ballot. So it will be up to the county commissioners in the end, which is part of having a couple of county commissioners on that planning group, because what we don't want is kind of the group going down a path that we know is confusing. So that's part of having that knowledge. And welcome to come back and talk quarterly. Just, I mean, it's one of those that we can't do this in a vacuum. We've got to make sure that people are aware so we can make a difference in this community. Otherwise, if we have something fail again, you know, we're looking at Mike and John. I mean, we're that much further away from making a difference in our community. And we know too, I mean, we've talked about it, that, you know, that's, even if it passes, you know, say next year, we're still, you know, 5-6 years down the road before we have a new facility. So what does it look like in between now and then as well? And if it, you know, doesn't pass, then people are gonna have to rethink what criminal justice looks like in the county.
I'm certainly not a political expert, but while task forces can be a challenge to put together and to get run effectively, my personal opinion is what made Whatcom County as successful as it was this last time. They had about the same percentages passing their measure as we had failing ours. Is that they got every elected body, irrespective of political affiliation, on board with the plan, telling their constituents, this is what we have to do. And I don't think we can ever underestimate how important that is, to have the city council in Spokane Valley, the city council in the city of Spokane, and all of the other jurisdictions saying, yes, this is something we have to do. You know, it certainly would be a lot easier to get there that way, as opposed to having people, you know, voicefully oppose a plan that they didn't all agree. So I think that's the reason that let's put this task force together. Let's make sure we have the representation that we want on it, and to make sure that the focus is better public safety outcomes for our constituents. You know, we look at what our mission statement is here in Spokane County. So let's make sure this task force is focused on making Spokane a safe place to live, work, and do business and go to school. And I think we can get there with this task force.
To envision the task, will the members of the planning team be sort of the initial people on the task force? And then you'll add to it, or is the task force going to be a completely new body without any of the members of the planning team? Because I see people on the planning team that I think would be great on the task force. Are you just starting with the planning team and then adding people to them to create the task force?
I think we're using the planning team as the top of the umbrella, and
Okay.
the task force then.
I could jump in and
Yeah.
just share that when Whatcom County did they call theirs their incarceration prevention and reduction task force. And the task force was primarily kind of the subject matter experts. But they did have this kind of planning team at the top, so to speak, that was giving the kind of strategic guidance, and that was like the chair of the county commission. So we've envisioned that the planning team would really be giving the guidance, the strategic direction to the subject matter experts who would really dive into the details, discuss it, and provide recommendations ultimately to all of us as the county and the cities.
I believe that the vision is that you, as the Board of County Commissioners, would have representation on the planning team, and you all would then be able to say, these are the people we think should be on this task force. I mean, we expect, at least my understanding is we expect this task force, there's gonna be quite a bit of work involved that I don't think anybody who's listed on the planning team has the capacity to make that a full-time job for the next 18 months. So there will be people, I think, that the board gets to suggest, people that I will suggest that will be on the task force, the subject matter experts.
And we did, kind of going back to the lessons of Whatcom County, we kind of laid out some of the experience areas that we want to make sure we include, obviously behavioral health, law enforcement, first responders, judicial, emergency response, business, finance, real estate. So it's got to be diverse to have all those perspectives, but the planning team would kind of give the general guidance.
Questions, what's gonna be the legal authority of the task force to make decisions?
Not making decisions. They're recommendations that will come back to the Board of County Commissioners.
What's the process for them to be able to vote to make recommendations?
Discuss that. That's what they're hiring. There's private businesses hiring a facilitator, and that facilitator is going to be the one to help guide that.
So I noticed that there are several supporters here that have openly advocated for, and I'm not opposed to, I'm just asking the question. They do not want the jail to be located downtown. And so is that been a precondition of the task force that would be citing?
Citing will be part of one of those.
Citing be part
What
of
we
the
think of
process.
subcommittees. So we look at it as that you've got us as the Board of County Commissioners are the ultimate authority. And you've got a task force, the planning committee, and then you've got the kind of the task force under that, but then subcommittees that will be doing work, and location is definitely one of the topics that we know we've got to address.
Oh, yeah, I just, and so, I mean, just very familiar with task force, been doing it for over 20 years and stuff, so I'm familiar with the process. That's why I'm asking questions about, assumptions, because if there is a different sighting, then the conversation has always been about the West Plains, but in the composition, there's nobody from the West Plains to represent their interests, so just point that out as an observation, not a. So, and then, there's also nobody in the recommendation that talks about finances. And so at some point, you're gonna have to have a financial model and a budget, that you're gonna bring forward. Who's gonna develop that? Is that gonna be us, or is that gonna be the task force?
The task force does have a public finance call out as a type of person we're looking to include. So there will be some expertise on that group with finance, but ultimately the board will be making financial decisions.
So we will have to have, I mean, as farmers obviously going to be on this task force,
Congratulations.
Number one.
But it's like, yes, I mean, it's ultimately, it's gonna be us on the financial side, having to figure out. Based on the information that we think we might be comfortable with, recommendations coming forward to us. And which is why we will be keeping, have to keep the board informed, so we can look at what those financial models will be.
I would never expect that the task force would come in and say, Commissioner French, this is the plan, you have to accept it. I just don't think that's the intent. The intent is, listen, here's a couple of different models of how we can get to where we need to be. Board of County Commissioners, which ones do you think is the most appropriate based on the recommendations the task force gives?
Well, and then I do see with the public finance, also real estate representatives would be there if you're gonna pick a different site. And again, I'm agnostic with where we put this thing. But the other thing you need to be aware of is that if we do it, other than on campus, we've got an EPF process that we've got to go through.
Yeah.
And that's a good 6-month process and stuff.
So
So
have to start sooner.
factor that into your timetable as well.
This looks really promising. Thank you, Commissioner CUNY and Jordan and Sheriff for all your work, and Emily for the business community poking us and saying, hey, how can we support a really good community dialogue? And we all know we have needs, so we need to put together what those are. But to Commissioner French's point, my only comments were gonna be, are you planning to have a facilitator to move the process along? And so it sounds like that's a yes. And then to Commissioner French's point, I think it's important to build in enough time to run those financial numbers. So you could have a long laundry list of actions, potential projects to be funded. So obviously facility costs are kind of one of the largest things to consider. But even other actions, other investments in our criminal justice system, like running the numbers on those to see what would that cost and can you afford that with how much would be raised by the, a potential ballot measure. So just thinking about building in the time to run some of those financial scenarios, because that would be important for the board to know for final decisions, right, of what to put on the ballot and what we can reasonably promise, right, to the voters.
Right, and we have preliminary ones from last time, just on what we were looking. Because part of this is looking at what the programming could be, all those
Right.
different things. So I mean, I'm not too worried about that. And happy to have Commissioner French be on the location committee. As we do that.
Well, I think this is.
Because I mean, location does, that drives the cost, which is, I think is gonna be
Exactly.
part of what we're gonna
It's really
show this-
important that we
show
talk
the
about that.
Citizens, how much additional costs would be incurred that and ongoing for operations that it will incur. So so those are some of the things we know we need to start to get those numbers. We need to get those numbers anyway, because that's a question that's gonna happen.
And that was gonna be my other suggestion, that facilities committee starting to get new updated costs. And if you are gonna look at different sites, that's gonna take time. And we would need to look at the dollars, not just to build, but then to operate over 20, 50
Which is why we
years.
wanted to get this started now. It's been a year in the process already. But trying to get this going now, because if we look at, it's gonna be the end of 2026, or if it gets pushed out to 2027, but every year we push it out is a year less of getting to that future point that we want to get to for our citizens.
I just want to echo what you said earlier, that Whatcom County did have some general financial picture put together for the ballot measure. As you referenced, they had a kind of agreement worked out between the county and the cities. And in the beginning, that a certain portion of the dollars would go to the county to basically do a down payment on the new facilities. And then after that point, half of it would go towards kind of the more behavioral health related program. So that's a lot of work. This is a big project to try and bring all that together. And that's why I think we've created a target for the spring for the action plan to be delivered, so that there's some time to kind of put those pieces together in terms of a package for potential ballot measure.
And Whatcom County, when it did pass, I think because of all the community engagement that they had done, they had 3 locations identified for the jail. They didn't have just one. They weren't set on one. There's 3 locations. So it wasn't as detailed as you think it would have been. They didn't have a number of beds because they felt like every time they put a number of beds, that was the target. So it was talking about the facility, what the programming can be, what can happen in that facility, but not identifying a total number of beds, because they hadn't had it fully designed yet. And so those were some of the things that they did see. The more detail you have, the more people can target. And so it was almost, going, we all want to have this type of facility that's going to be able to do these type of things. We want to have, programming that's gonna help, but they knew the programming, 50% of the dollars would go to programming, but that would be after the initial construction, down payment. So, so those are the things that, we don't know. I mean, how do we work through that? Because if a location is gonna drive a group to go, no way, no how. I don't know, but we also know in Spokane County, I think we do have to get to where that location is. Because I think we just have to know that due to costs and due to location and the proximity to everything, where it might be. So, and, so just because Whatcom County did it, doesn't mean we have to do it that way. We're just trying to go, what is gonna work for us to get the citizens to understand the need? Because I think, that's why doing the tours of the jail and doing it, people just didn't understand how it is. And like I keep saying, it's a maximum security jail. It's not a low security jail. It doesn't allow for these opportunities that everybody wants. And if we're really gonna not have people in the system, we have to have the cities doing programming in their cities that using their dollars that way, so they don't get into the jail. That's not on the county to be doing that. We have to provide a facility. So those are the things that we keep, we're talking about and wrestling with, that we need people to be thinking about. But ultimately, they all know that it's the county commissioners that make the decision and then decide to put it on the ballot.
Just a couple of comments. In the letter, I know I do, and I think many of us do, get frustrated or maybe defensive on the work that we're already doing that is not widely aware in the community. For the community, maybe we haven't put laser-like focus on it to create their awareness. We might want to consider also some recent expansions that we've done on the opioid funds regarding sobering beds. So people say, hey, invest more in behavioral health. Well, we've got the Spokane Regional Crisis Stabilization Facility. Well, I didn't know about it. Hey, do more on sobering and mat service. Well, we are already doing that stuff. So just a suggestion, maybe highlight some of the sobering beds that we're doing with STARS. I'll echo Commissioner Waldrop and Commissioner French's comment around financing. I think the finance modeling with support from county, city, others is going to be really important in the task force, because you got to truth test some of the recommendations being made on affordability. And they won't have necessarily the finite knowledge of how does this tax work? And what does the apportionment look like? And who gets what and over what period of time? And how do you project for what growth might be? So I think it's really important that as recommendations come up, there is some sort of a financial model to be able to support it. So it's not a wish list of everything. It's here's what we prioritize and here's what we think we can afford. And kind of same on the location thing. I think that's going to need to be a real robust conversation. I've had conversation with Emily recently, and there's a lot of wide opinions around location of it. And I think that again has to come back to feasibility of where an appropriate location would be, and what are the, if not here, then and it's somewhere else, what are the impacts on the jurisdictions, the courts, the everything that goes into all that sort of thing. So I think that's going to be really, really important to have a healthy and robust dialogue on the facilities task force. So I think this is good. I think a lot of our challenges are getting people to understand the complexities, and we oftentimes do because we live it every single day, but the general public doesn't. So if investing in a larger task force, that knowledge and wider awareness of the challenges, opportunities, and that could be a force multiplier by communicating it out more broadly in the community. I think that's could be a positive, should be a positive approach.
There's the letter says, an action plan by spring of 2026. Now, Sheriff, you said that this task force will be over for 18 months.
So off the top of my head.
Okay, Commissioner CUNY, you said if this gets kicked to 27, I think we have to be focused on 26. I don't think an odd year works. And when you look at a massive amount of the voters in this community on an odd year, if you're outside a city, like your flagship thing on your ballot are school board races. So, I mean, like, this has to be on an even numbered year if we want voter turnout. If we want to hear from the largest amount of voters in this community, it has to be an even numbered year. So you have those state and federal races on that ballot to really drive people to actually vote. So, I mean, I think 26 is the year we have to hit. I think 28 is too late. 27, we're in the same situation we were in 23. It's, you need something to drive people to actually vote.
We agree. And I think the task force, part of the responsibility that the task force will have, as well as, the elected councils and boards, will be after we are given a plan that this task force says, we think this is the best way forward, and everyone decides we're going to adopt that, put it on the ballot measure. I think task force members will then continue to go out and do community outreach to make sure that the community understands it. That's why I was at 18 months. I think everybody believes we have to have something on 26.
So I believe, and probably ask, staff to confirm this, but I think that 2026 is also the year for reauthorization of the 911 Emergency Communications Initiative. It's either up in, I think it's up in 27. We've always ran it the year before. So if it fails, we can come back and run another ballot so that we don't exhaust or run out of money. So there's that. That is also going to have to be on the ballot.
Is
Need to
that
figure out
a 10-year?
10-year.
That I am almost certain it didn't run in 16.
I think it ran
Because that was when I was
No,
on the ballot.
No, I think we did it in 17.
Yeah, so you run it 27, 10 years later, right?
No, but what we've always done is we've run it a year ahead of its expiration so that it doesn't expire. Because remember, as a tax, if you've got to notify the treasury in April. And so otherwise you lose a whole year.
So are you saying it ran at 16 then? If it started in 17? You ran it, or
It was. And I'm going from memory here, so I apologize for that. But when we ran it the first time, it failed. We ran it the second year, the year after that, and it passed. And then when we ran it to the second reauthorization, we ran it a year ahead of when it was supposed to expire so that we didn't lose the revenue. Because if you run it in the same year it expires, you end up losing a year of revenue at least. So we try and avoid the loss of that revenue. And that's why I'm saying that and you need to reconfirm the dates. And for some reason, I wanted to say that we did it in 17, but it could have been 18. I don't remember. It's not important to the conversation. It's about laying out a schedule for ballot measures and that might compete, influence, or harm what we want to do with the public safety issue. The other conversation that's out there is, do not put STA's ballot measure on the ballot, allow that to expire, and then use that revenue to pay for a jail. I don't think there's 5 votes on the STA board to do that, but a suggestion that I've made, and I'll repeat it here, is if you're really concerned about them competing with each other, put them on the same ballot. And then let the public decide. It's their money, not ours. Let the public decide what it wants to do. So that's.
But wouldn't STA board have to decide to put it on the same ballot?
Yes, yeah. So it'd have to be a coordinated effort between us and the STA board.
Is your STA's up for renewal?
Again, don't hold me to this. For some reason, I want to say it's either 27 or 28. We've talked about putting it on the ballot in 26 because it's not unusual for us to have to run 2 ballots to get a successful ballot measure. And so,
I think when we did the survey, remember
yeah,
at the end of last year, we
Right.
kind of, the whole board was doing it. I think they'd asked if we wanted to put it on 26, 27, or 28. So I think
Right.
all three of those years are possibilities
Yeah.
without it lapsing, so.
Yeah.
It's,
the
it's an
last
option.
year is is 28, so we've always tried to anticipate that it might take 2 cycles to get it passed, so just putting it on the table for conversation. That you need to figure out how do you coordinate with the other
But I think
potential
the-
competing issues.
the goal would be 26.
Yeah.
So, just because the longer we delay this.
Oh.
the worse it
Argument
gets.
at all,
So,
I'd love to see it on 26.
Okay, and then, Scott, and then we're gonna wrap up here.
Emergency communications, tax, Commissioner French was right, it was put on in 17. It was expiring at the, towards the end of 18, it was a November, a September timeframe. It expires, this time it was renewed for 10 years, what's it, 3 months. End of 28 is when it expires. So by putting on 27 a year ahead, it doesn't do the lapse and it doesn't compete with the. Yes,
Thank you.
Was
I knew it
it,
was coming up.
was it run in a special election or something?
nope, it was run on must have been on the primary.
So, so anyway, so the letter is there. I mean, if you're open to wordsmithing, we will put it on, the agenda for next week. I don't think each jurisdiction has to be exactly the same. It can be, but it's just all of it. We just want to make sure that the valley was committed to doing this, the city is committed to doing this, and that we're committed to doing it. Just moving forward to try to get that community input and figure out what people are thinking.
I think I had tentatively planned in my mind to have it on a Tuesday, 2 o'clock, I think, following week. So if there's kind of ideas, task force members, let us know. But unless we, changing that, I was thinking 2 weeks from today, we would hopefully all sign the letter.
Okay.
But, could I just make one last comment?
Yeah.
Just to Scott's, I think you make good points. And I think it's very much aligned with what has been envisioned. The action plan calls for actionable and cost-effective strategies, so I think implies some level of financial analysis. And then we did highlight that we are coordinating investments to tackle the drug crisis using our opioid settlement funds, working with growth and crisis stabilization center, code playing behavioral health professionals. So we don't want to create this exhaustive list of what we're doing, but I think you're right. A big piece of this is going to be educating on the good things that are being done. So just wanted to say I agree.
And if it was to Tuesday after next, that would work best from my standpoint, because as I indicated earlier,
Oh, you're
I'm
gonna
not, I'm in DC again next week.
let's plan to do
Sure.
that. I may be zooming into that meeting on that Tuesday, because it's right after. Yeah,
So what's the time for, so that's when we would take a vote to sign the letter.
yes, and then we want to get it up and going as soon as.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna, what's the timeframe for putting people on the task force? And is that a joint decision amongst all of those jurisdictions? Like, we throw in a few names, city council throws in a few, valley throws in a few, is that the
Yeah,
plan?
we're planning that the planning committee will be the one determining who's actually on
But
the
if
list.
we,
Oh,
but if we want to suggest
Yes, yeah.
members, we can do that in the next. So to Commissioner Kern's question, so that we're not gonna establish the task force then in 2 weeks, but we're basically saying to the planning committee, please go forward to create the task force and we can give names and suggestions. Okay.
And the idea, to answer your question, the idea is as soon as possible in June. I mean, we gotta get this thing moving. So the idea would be, we all share ideas for task force members. Ultimately, that multi-jurisdictional planning team will determine that together. And then as soon as the 3 jurisdictions approve it, hopefully this month, it would start in June, ideally.
Because the business community is waiting for the jurisdictions to approve the task force before they hire a facilitator.
so there's a lot of similarities into our regional homelessness effort.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of using that.
Deadline driven.
Sorry to be the Debbie Downer on that one.
But But I agree, like eventually we should have like a firm deadline. Cause spring's a 3-4 month season of next year, so like a firm deadline by which we would want our
Prior to
recommendations.
May, because there's a deadline to put some
Well,
of them
exactly,
on.
we wanna have time before August to put something on a ballot, so, yeah.
So I think,
Working backwards.
I think Emily knows,
Hustle,
you know,
hustle.
we talked about that. It's gonna be fast and furious once we kind of get
Well,
going.
and I think that's part of the reason that our private entities have committed to continuing to participate on the planning process. To frankly, maybe keep a little fire lit on the idea of continuing to push this forward, and we are convening, and actually the idea is we've been meeting to continue to push forward the facilitator to be ready as soon as you all the jurisdictions approve for the task force to be able to like initiate that. So
But we are way over on our time, so.
Sorry.
So,
This was never gonna be a 15-minute
No.
discussion, Mary.
I know.
I'll take.
So thank you, Emily, for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you. So yeah, so take time to look at the letter, think about task force members, think about, you know, any other comments or questions you have, just talk to Chris or I about all of that. Okay, so Dr. Zing, is she? Now that we are behind, but that's how it's going. Let's see if everyone can. Dr. Zing, are you on? I apologize that we're a half hour late here.
No worries, I'm here. Sorry, I got stuck into another project and then
Yes.
missed my cue to become a panelist. Sorry about that.
No
Um,
worries.
Good morning, everyone. I am here just to brief you on our annual report. It's finally done. Sorry for we're a little bit delayed this year. We were still waiting for some additional test results to come back from the state lab. But we finally gotten everything back and analyzed, and we're ready to publish the annual report. So I just wanted to come and give you a sneak preview of some highlights of the annual report this year. So on this first slide here, you'll see the breakdown of manner of death classification for deaths occurring in Spokane County that were handled by my office. So in 2024, we did see a slight rise in suicides. It was about a 10% increase over 2023 and about a 17% increase over 2022. So not a really startling rise, but just something to keep an eye on. We also saw a slight increase in unattended natural deaths, so people not under the care of a physician. That went up about 4% over 2023, but in total about 23% increase over 2022. Then accidental deaths, as we all know, did go up also. Those went up about 12% between 2023 and 2024, about 29% or a little bit over 29% from 2022 to 2024. And those are, again, mostly driven by our accidental overdoses. Next slide. As you're already aware, and you've seen this slide, I think, recently, fentanyl-related deaths did continue upward in 2024. Unfortunately, the trend is still upward in 2025. The small graph in the corner there just shows you the first quarter of 2024 versus first quarter 2025. And we do still have, I think it's 18 now pending deaths for 2025. So the number of 2025 fentanyl related deaths may still go up, but even without that final number, you can see that the trajectory is still upward. Next slide.
Dr. Singh, Commissioner Jordan.
Dr. Singh, can you just clarify for me, are all of these Spokane County residents or are they a wider group of folks?
So the deaths, these are the deaths occurring in Spokane County. We didn't do the I guess the analysis to see where their home addresses are, but these are people who are overdosing in Spokane County.
Okay,
I would
thank
say
you.
sort of off the top of my head, most of them are.
Yeah.
Their home addresses are Spokane County, but we didn't specifically analyze that.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Yeah, and, additional question for you, Doctor. On the increase in suicides, is that across the board, or it's been suggested to me that we're seeing an increase in suicides for military veterans. And I didn't know whether that increase was related to veterans or whether it was just in a general increase.
It's a general increase. We're seeing more older persons committing suicide. I
Okay.
think part of that rise is in that demographic, so age 60 and above. We do see, though, a lot of military veterans committing suicide also. I don't know that that number has changed appreciably, but it has remained relatively high compared to the general population.
Thank you.
Okay, and so I know I always harp on this, but I just want to point out again that fentanyl isn't the only substance detected in these deaths. In fact, most of the deaths, 70% or a little bit over that, had more than one drug contributing to the death. The most commonly detected drug besides fentanyl was methamphetamine, and that, as you can see, has had a continuous rise sort of in parallel to the fentanyl-related deaths. We're also seeing a rise in deaths where cocaine was detected either alone or as part of a toxic mix of drugs. And then I do also want to mention that alcohol is detected in a lot of these overdose deaths as well, the mixed overdose deaths. You can see in the smaller graph on the upper right of the slide there that in 2024, there were 104 alcohol-related deaths, and that is due because of alcohol's effects on the brain and the heart. So it plays a significant role in many of these accidental mixed drug overdoses. Next slide. So in addition to the large number of drug overdoses, so where the drug is directly causing the death, we did also have a fair number of deaths in which drugs played a contributing role in a non-overdose death. So most commonly, these are deaths due to heart disease, cardiovascular disease, where the person had significant heart disease, either due to chronic drug use or to hereditary factors or a combination of both. And they were also using drugs, most commonly methamphetamine. So the methamphetamine contributed to the heart death, but it was not the main cause of the heart death. And then I also want to mention again the adverse effects of alcohol use. So chronic alcohol use did cause 21 deaths in 2024 in our county. There are also a number of deaths in which alcohol isn't listed on the death certificate, but it's a strong risk factor that's associated with other types of deaths, for example, falls, traffic accidents, environmental exposure deaths, and drowning. Next slide. So on this slide, you can see the distribution of overdose deaths by age. Again, it does impact all ages, but I do in this slide want to highlight what might be some good news or hope potentially good news. So as you can see on the smaller graphs here, in people less than age 30 and more than age 50, we're starting to see the curves flatten out a little bit. So this is again something to watch. I'm hopeful that this means that these deaths, again, they're still high, but they are leveling off somewhat. Unfortunately, we did have a sharp increase in overdose deaths in people between the ages of 30 and 50. So that middle age group is still using drugs or overdosing in larger numbers. But we are, as opposed to previous years, where we have seen a rise in every age group, we're starting to see some of those age groups flatten out. So good news. Next slide. You've all seen the graph on the left, I think, indicating that across the county, there are more fatal overdoses in the housed population than the unhoused population. But I do want to point out, and you can see in the graph on the right-hand side, the number of unhoused people suffering a fatal overdose is steadily increasing. So that's the blue bar on that graph. And the number of housed people suffering fatal overdoses is remaining roughly the same. So I don't know if this means there are more unhoused people and therefore the same proportion of them are overdosing, or if there are the same number of unhoused people, but they're overdosing at a higher rate. So I just observing the trend, but I'm not quite sure how to interpret it as yet. But hopefully there's somebody out there who after doing a count of unhoused people or putting other data together can say whether that is basically because there are more unhoused people or because for whatever reason they're using drugs at a higher rate or they have a more dangerous supply or whatever is happening.
Commissioner Curtis.
Next slide.
Oh, well, I was just gonna ask, I mean, just looking at the population in our community, I mean, just gonna use round numbers here. I mean, 550,000 people in Spokane County, roughly. Unhoused population, I mean, on the high end, we're looking at about 5,000-ish. I mean, kind of that's sort of your highest numbers that float around out there. So, I mean, I think it would it certainly be safe to say disproportionately unhoused people are overdosing as opposed to housed people? I mean, yes, when you're looking at just raw numbers, but in respect to the makeup of the overall population. I noticed that this was a point at our joint meeting with the city council that you presented similar data to us. I know there was an individual there that tried to say, see, this shows housed people are overdosing more. But in proportion to the amount of people that are in the community, this does more impact unhoused than housed. But would that be safe to say?
I think that's accurate to say, yes. If you look at the population separately, so amongst the unhoused, far and away, the most common cause of death in that population is overdose. Whereas if you look at the housed population separately, it's better distributed. The highest number of deaths is still overdose deaths, but it's better distributed across other causes of death as well.
Thank you.
Okay, next
And
one.
just a second,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're just a little box, so I can't see who's got their hand up.
That's okay. It's all right. Thanks. Thanks for sending some stats to me last week too, when we were in DC. I really appreciate that. So how do you know, this is just a question, how do you know if the person is housed or unhoused? Is that data that you get when the deceased comes to you and you do your investigation? Or I know at one point you were giving us statistics for people who passed away in a home versus on the street, but I didn't know if this was the same data.
This is roughly the same data, yes. So our investigators do gather that information when the death is, when someone is there who knows that. We're always limited by who's there who can give us the information. But yes, if someone is living in a tent or on the sidewalk, obviously we know that they're unhoused. But there are also people who are in transitional housing, short-term housing, staying with a friend, that type of thing. And where there is somebody who knows them, then we do collect that information that, yes, they're generally unhoused, but sometimes they come and stay here, or they stay here the night before a medical appointment, or whatever the case may be. And we still classify those people as unhoused, even though they might be dying indoors at that point in time.
So it's really like permanently, if the person has a permanent home or not. Okay, thank you.
That's correct, yeah. Sorry, are there other?
Same question.
You're good to go.
Okay, all right. So moving away from overdose deaths now, I just want to highlight a couple of other things as we head into the summer months and the river is cold and running very high right now. First, in 2024, we did see an increase in the number of recreational drownings. It's still only 8, but only 8, they're all preventable deaths. So I want to bring this up. As you can see on the map, only one of these was in a lake and the rest were in the Spokane River. And then I just wanted the little text on the side there is the Spokane Regional Health District site. They do have a nice page on drowning prevention. And currently there's also a coupon there for 20% off a life vest. So if anyone is in the market for a life vest, which is a good idea for protection, go navigate to that site. So again, just the drowning as a risk. We do see drowning combined with hypothermia a lot. That's because the river or whatever water the person is in generally is still cold into the summer. And then also we do see drowning deaths in people who are intoxicated, and intoxication is a risk factor for drowning. So just to highlight the fact that we do have drowning deaths every year. Next slide. Also in 2024, we had 35 exposure related deaths. So we had 21 deaths in which environmental cold exposure or hypothermia either caused or contributed to death, and 14 deaths in which environmental heat exposure caused or contributed to the death. Here again, there's an expectation typically that most persons dying of exposure deaths are unhoused or outdoor, living outdoors. That actually isn't borne out in our population that we see. So only 8 people out of the 35 environmental exposure deaths were members of the unhoused community. 27 of these or 77% of them were in the house population. So those dying of heat exposure actually were predominantly found inside their homes. And those were usually in homes that did not have a working cooling system at that time. 2 people were in their own yards, and then 1 person was at work. And then of those dying of cold exposure, there was a mix of people found indoors in a home without adequate heating, and then people who were found in their yards or driveways. And then going back to the drowning piece, 3 of those people died in the river, so hypothermia was a contributing condition to their drowning. And then as we start, sorry, just back on that slide, I wanted to also highlight Gonzaga University. They have a great website where there's a lot of great information on heat exposure and mitigating the effects of excessive heat. Sometimes the traffic or the weather, the temperature predictions and so on weather apps aren't hyper local or super specific to your region. So you can go to their heat map and see if possibly someone's neighborhood might actually be hotter than the listed temperature. That will hopefully help mitigate some of these exposure deaths. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
Dr. Singh, can I ask what's the differentiation in the, like, on your bar graph, you have heat, but it has 2 different shades of yellow, and on cold, it has 2 different shades of blue. What do the different colors mean?
Oh, so yes, the colors are whether the heat was a direct cause, that's the darker yellow, or was a contributing factor with the lighter yellow. And likewise with the cold, the darker blue is the direct cause was the cold, and the lighter blue is if it was a contributing condition.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then the next slide. Lastly, it's always a good time to talk about traffic safety. So in 2024, we had 75 motor vehicle fatalities. As you can see, the fatalities affect all ages. A little over 50% of these were motor vehicle drivers or passengers, so occupants of a motor vehicle. About 20% were motorcyclists, about 20% were pedestrians or bicyclists, and then 3% were operating an ATV at the time of the fatal crash. The only category where fatalities increased significantly in 2024 was motor vehicle drivers. Those actually increased about 67% over the previous years. So looking specifically at the driver group, I want to highlight a couple of things. First, that driving under the influence of alcohol and or drugs is a well-known risk factor for motor vehicle crashes. And indeed, in our group, drivers made up the majority of those testing positive for some substance. So 57% of drivers had a positive toxicology test. And you can see in the upper right graph that the majority of those tested positive for alcohol, illicit drugs, or a combination of alcohol and illicit drugs. And then second, not using a seatbelt significantly increases the risk of an injury or death once a crash does occur. And in our fatal crashes, 64% of motor vehicle occupants were not wearing a seatbelt. So some possible areas for public health messaging. And last slide. This is it for my overview. We'll put the full report up probably by tomorrow morning on our website. So there's a lot more information. It's a pretty dense report as usual, but the full report will be there available again by tomorrow morning. So if we had any other questions for me?
Now, well,
Just real quick on the motor vehicle piece, I see there's 14 pedestrian deaths. Seems like a lot. I'm just wondering, do you see any trends in any of those over time? Whether it's, people in the vehicle or pedestrians or otherwise?
So yes, in the pedestrian fatalities, we did have, it's a decrease. So in 2023, we had a really strange surge in pedestrian people who were struck by motor vehicles. And we had 25 such deaths in 2023. So only 14 this year in 2024, but that is still an increase over 2022. We had 8 such deaths in 2022, and I think it was 6 in 2021 or something like that. So it had been relatively flat. And then the big spike in 2023, and then now coming down, but still to a higher level than it was before. Some of those people also were intoxicated, but not enough of them to say this is clearly something that contributed to being strong. I might have gotten off track. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate all the information. I think as we know, it's been helping us as we have the discussion on fentanyl in the community and what's happening. And as we've seen the national trends on fentanyl overdoses go down, we're not seeing that here. And I think, it'd be interesting to know the state numbers. I don't know if you get that with the other medical associations or medical examiners.
Yes, I can find that out. It is available on some of the state tracking websites.
Okay, or just, you could send us, if it's a link, you could just send us a link, but I think that'd be good information for us to know, how we compare here versus the rest of the state as well. So, so thank you, just, since it's such a topic of discussion and where we're trying to look to put dollars to decrease that. I think that suicide, I think the governor actually just released that he's looking at suicide for the military for veterans, and is making that a focus. So so it'd be kind of interesting to see, some of those comparisons, just knowing that it's not separated out, but just suicide statewide versus where we're at in Spokane County. Just, discussions that we're having and trying to figure out how we can help our community.
Absolutely, yes, and any data that we can provide, as we do collect a lot of it. So I'm always happy to share whatever will be helpful.
Awesome, thank you. Commissioner French, you have been.
Yeah, and I appreciate the governor's increased focus on the increase in suicide rates for military veterans. And I know that it's probably a little bit more problematic on the other side of the state than it is this one, because of Elizabeth McCord and some of the other stations and stuff. But that's why I was curious as to whether we're seeing it on this side as well and stuff. So but I do appreciate the effort and the focus on our veterans.
Yeah, we don't, again, we're sort of limited in what information is provided to us as far as someone's military status and whether they're veterans. But yeah, I can definitely try to pull out veteran deaths and we can see what the breakdown of those is and what the trends are in that group.
Thank you. That would be great. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. As always, it's always, good. It's not a good topic, but it's good information that we're getting to be able to make decisions. So thank you very much for all you do.
Thanks. Take care.
Okay. Okay, that's going to take us to, it's Ashley.
Yep.
Right here. Oh, there you are. I see you over there. Sorry that we're running late today, but
You're fine.
the way it goes, I guess.
I have Mr. Witter here and Mr. DeNaro is here for moral support as this applies to the work that he does. So on page 21 of your materials, there is a draft MOU between both courts and county as far as records being released that are actually court records. And to be clear, this reflects what our practice is right now. I thought it was nice or would help for the event that staffing changes, administrators change, IT directors change, to just memorialize what our process is when Mr. DeNaro receives requests that actually need to come to the courts. So we're here to answer any questions. The one question that I have, provided that the board is comfortable with proceeding with this MOU as drafted, is who would the board like to sign off on that? Do you want the full board to sign off on it, or do you want CEO? Boards across the state have done it both ways, so that's why you'll see that it's just right now. I just have the two presiding judges, and I haven't included anybody from county because I didn't know who you would want to sign.
And is this the first time we're doing this MOU?
Yes.
Okay. So this is kind of standard practice.
In other courts?
Across the state, as standards recommended by our associations. This is a big issue in a lot of jurisdictions in our states that we've learned from our colleagues. We don't have that issue at all with Tony McRae relationship. The second he was hired, we both met with him, went over what court records look like as opposed to general public records. So, but it is like Ashley said, players change, so this would be nice to have this solidified.
Legal has looked at this, both from the court's perspective, Tony's perspective. And so
Ashley and I had talked, Ashley Cloud and I had talked about this as well, and it is reflecting current practices. What we're already doing today and Tony's work with Superior District Court. This does just put it on paper so that, as Ashley mentioned, as people change out, we still have something to point back to. So we're very comfortable with entering this MOU that just lays out what our current and future practice will be.
All the board want to sign off on it. Scott.
Either way.
We'll just have Scott sign off on it. Perfect.
great, thank you. Any other questions?
All right, thank you, thank you. Scott?
Next.
Sorry, Gil.
So close. Almost there, man.
Yeah. Good morning, sorry we're running late, so we'll just have you guys get going.
Very good. We'll be very quick. We have a first slide presentation. And effectively, it was time to update our on-call forestry management services. And Mr. Kurt Chambers, our operations division manager, took lead on this and can share how we utilize these services. And I'll let you take it from there. I've covered 3 or 4.
Okay. It's quick. So on March 18th, County Parks Department published an RFP requesting on-call forestry management services. Deadline for the RFP was April 9th. We received 3 responses from qualified companies. Park staff evaluated and ranked in order a cumulative score. If the board approves or supports, purchasing will issue an on-call multi-award in a ranked order. 3 companies in the forest, West Management and American Forest Management. Multi-award. Past years, we've used these services to develop forest management plans, write prescriptions for our fire fuel mitigation projects, and perform pre-acquisition evaluations on CF properties as needed. Some of the examples are a couple of our recent forest management plans this year, are fire fuel mitigation, Bear Lake and Ditchman Hills. And then a couple of years ago, we did a commercial timber sale where the forest company wrote a prescription and managed the commercial timber sale out of McClellan. Future work to use these services are going to focus on our timber sales, forest management and health prescriptions, habitat enhancement. They'll act as an agency liaison and assist with conflict resolution and some staff training. We've applied for some grants, and these services will be used if the grant is awarded at Holmberg Conservation Area, Haynes Conservation Area, Beacon Hill, and Glen Rose. For writing and helping us manage a forest mitigation projects at these lands.
So are these, I apologize if you've already said this, is this do you try and go out for these qualified folks, like every other year, or how long do you usually take between
This, yes, that's a good question. This is a renewal. I believe it's a 5-year.
5 year? Okay.
Yes,
With an option to renew each year up to 5 years.
yes, and it's a time and material.
Okay, but the process is basically you look at the proposals and then you rank folks. So what you're basically proposing is the first company gets the first call for
Yes,
the work. And if they can't do the work, then the next company on the list.
correct.
Yes, and I think there's flexibility if for some reason, say the second company on, you have a unique project that the second company would be most qualified for. And you can show that, then you have an option there, but generally you work your way down.
Because of the planned work we have, if these grants come to fruition, we thought a ranked order would be best rather than just choosing one company
Right.
for capacity
There's-
They're
increases.
tied up. Yeah.
Right, I mean, there's a lot of, as I understand, I mean, there's a lot of DNR money going into all sorts of projects around the region. So there's a lot of forest management work happening. So I could imagine that some of the companies are gonna have a lot of projects. So I think that's a good idea. Just have multiple that you can choose from. Okay, so 5 years then with an option to continue on supporting the county.
Yes,
Thanks.
so then if the board approves, awarding these on-call services, purchasing will bring next week's legislative session resolution.
So the discussion about forestry management and stuff is very timely because Shrek has just issued a level 2 evacuation. Fire District 3 is responding to a wildfire in again, District 5. A Street, B Road and L Lane and Y Drive due to wildfire, so. Season begins.
Surprised everything's so wet.
Yeah.
Surprising.
Other than getting the notice, I can't conjecture about what started the fire, but because of all the recent weather.
Yeah.
Rain and stuff, it's very possible it's been created. But no more.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bill. Now.
And I can talk while I'm handing these out. Good morning, commissioners. Our 5-year contract, renewal, was, expired for our janitorial contract. Same as most of our contracts on that end for services. They have a 5-year expiration with a renewal annually to renew the contract. Our 5 years was up. We solicited out for bid in March. It had actually expired at the end of the year, but we took the time to really go through and rewrite the actual cleaning schedule for the contract to go to a more standardized format. It was really hard to decipher the existing contract. So this made it more standardized. So we knew the areas where the public facing areas on the public side as to the actual office areas for the other side. So everybody is on the same page as far as cleaning schedules go. So we had an opportunity to rewrite that, clarify it so it actually made sense. We put it out to bid in March. We had 4 companies. The criteria for this was part of the interview process. We took a deep dive into some of the companies that we've worked with previous and wanted to find out where not only strengths and weaknesses, but also if we had a chance to really fix some of the existing issues that we keep hearing every time we put a new contract, cleaning contract into operation. So we put those into our write-up with standardized contract. We ended up getting 4 vendors for that, which we set a panel up. A panel of 4 went through a ratings process. I put what the actual criteria was on those for the weighting. I put the attachment on the second page of this. And then these were based on the evaluations that we did. These were the scores that came out. The 2 top companies, we brought them in for second interviews to go through some questions on quality assurance measures. We wanted them to really give us a really good explanation of how these items that we had monitored over time, that we were actually looking for real detail on how they correct these issues. And the Management Services Northwest was our top scorer. So with the renewal of the contract, it will be a 5-year contract with an annual renewal process that we'll go through. We try to do a status update with them on a quarterly to semi-annual basis. How's it going? How are we doing? And really getting feedback from them on areas where they feel that we might need to adjust. So they have a really good system with that. Again, we liked some of the areas that we feel like we've needed correction on and how they made recommendations of how they do that. Restrooms getting barcoded feedback. They'll be putting some placards in the restrooms, things of that nature. So they are a very detail oriented company that actually has an electronic work order system similar to what we use here in our facilities group. So it's not just a schedule that goes on a wall. This entire contract schedule we rewrote, they digitized it and imported it into their work order system. So what I'm looking for today is this is actually, because it is a 30-day notice and we have to do this transition period for bringing in the new janitorial staff, running the background checks, the training, the tours. It is about a 30-day process. So it will actually be on the consent agenda for this afternoon with our purchasing department.
Okay, I see it's 4I. Today's 2 o'clock.
Questions? Yep.
How many staff are covered under this currently, the ABM contract, we know?
Yeah, we're roughly around 12 full-time, and there's about probably 6 flex positions on top of that. And the same group will be about the same.
Their staff.
Yeah, their staff, yeah.
Yep.
I'm just asking the question about the timeliness of needing to vote on it today. I think the board's probably received some, I don't know if others have, I've received some comments just today from probably people just concerned about the changeover
So
of jobs. So I'm wondering, and I met with somebody yesterday who had some comments about it, community member. So I'm just wondering if there's a downside to doing it through the regular process so that those folks could have a chance to have express their opinions, because I think if anyone came down to the hearing today, they wouldn't be able to testify to anything on the agenda. So just wanted to throw that out there. Would that impact negatively on your transition?
here's my only comment to that is now we have had this discussion, we're going that direction. The last time this happened to me with transitioning from one company to the other, the company at the 2-week mark walked off the job. So
Oh,
that,
current.
Exactly. So even though we give them the 30-day notice, which is in the contract, there may be an instance where, because they didn't get the new contract, they may walk off the job. Because they do have to place employees that they presently have. And knowing that they're not moving forward, there is that possibility.
Yeah, and we've experienced this, you know, and I've personally experienced it on other boards as well as this one. Is that there sometimes employees get a sense of entitlement about the job, and the company itself loses their aggressiveness with regard to pricing. And so you're always balancing that interest with the interest of the county and the taxpayers about how do we get the best deal, best value for the taxpayer dollars. And so there is that tension, but you always have, in my mind, you always have to yield to what is in the best interest of the taxpayers. I reviewed this with Gil yesterday, and I didn't see anything unusual about it. The company that he's recommending is a good company, so. But you always get that tension.
Another clarification on the criteria. Where it says like parts 1, 2, 3, parts 3.1, 3.2, what is that referring to? Is there a further?
There
description
is
of
a
the criteria?
contract, and that's all laid out in the evaluation. This is just the top sheet that really shows these are the actual, this is the criteria, this is how we rate them. But there is an evaluation procedure for that. I sent that to Commissioner Waldorf this morning. I can send that to you today.
So that fleshes out what that
Yes.
in more detail.
Yep, what exactly we are looking for.
Okay.
So in the final scoring that you have here.
Yeah.
So thanks for sending me the background materials. That's helpful. Does the final scoring take into account the interviews you did? You talked about scoring first.
Right.
Proposals, and then you brought in the 2 top companies for the interviews.
Right, so we did that after the scoring.
Okay.
So we did the initial scoring on the 2. I think I had talked to Jeff about this. We had one of the individuals on our scoring panel, his daughter had an emergency surgery. He had to leave, and he didn't get the opportunity on the 2 highest scored groups to really talk with them. So that's why we brought him back in. He oversees with his employee. They're the administrators of the contract. They're the ones that kind of follow up on the QA side of it for the county to make sure that they're doing what is stated in the contract. He didn't get a chance to do that. That's why we went ahead and brought the 2 top organizations in. On the 2 top organizations on the scoring level, they were also the 2 lowest bidders for the project. So it was kind of a reverse in that direction, where we had rated them higher even though their annual cost was lower. But we did on this one, however, it really came down to the quality and how they measure the quality, how their operators, what is the turnover rate? We had many factors that we went through in the interviews with them, and they hit all the right buttons on that.
Did you know the cost when you were scoring, or is that held till the end?
That's held till the end.
So they were scored without knowing
Exactly.
the costs.
So once we did we actually did the rating based on the packets, then that is when they revealed the bids to us. So that was where they show us what they charge for. It was kind of an interesting dynamic, because out of the 2 that we selected, One really does kind of a base by square footage, where the new group that we picked actually does it per task and time that'll take to clean it. So they take all that into account. They had some really good breakdowns on, you know, garbage and how they transfer and the time it takes to do that, and working within our systems.
So the cost differential was it large or?
It was fairly significant.
Okay.
So it was a little bit over 400,000 annual.
With this new contract, you're saying it's 400,000 less than what
Yes.
we're paying today?
It's actually even more than that. It's close to the 400 for what the company, so we rewrote the contract to a standardized format. So we gave the existing company a chance to rework their numbers, since there were a lot of items that were placed, specialized cleanings in areas and stuff. We removed all that from the standardized model. So they were able to readjust their numbers, and even with their readjusted numbers, they were close to the new company.
And were there references on this new company? Cause I know they have a presence in Washington State, but they're
Yep.
they're kind of new to the area though, for Spokane.
Over here on the east side, they do have several contracts. They have all the global credit unions and a couple other financial institutions, some office spaces. They are really getting their foothold over here on this side of the state. But on the west side of the state, they service all of Pierce County, even down to the jail model. So they hit all the matrices that we have here as a county and know how to do it. Their training program, it was kind of refreshing because it's the first janitorial service I've worked through that actually, not only do they have a one-on-one training program with their employees, but they actually, if their employees aren't hitting the metrics, they actually have it all, they have to go back through these training portions to make sure that they can get back on schedule. Again, on the questions we had for the interview, they really hit them all.
Well, two things. One, the evacuation notice I got was a test. It wasn't an actual wildfire, so I just wanted to let you know that. So, well, you don't know the way you come across. The other thing is that, you know, Gil and I through the process, and one of the things, and I've had to hire janitorial services for office buildings and stuff that I've done. And one of the things that you have greatest risk at is employee turnover. Because every time you employee turnover, you've got to redevelop relationships and everything with your tenants, and you know, it can become a real nightmare. And I was impressed by the company that is selected because of their not only employee retention program, but also their training exercise and stuff. So it's not just hiring somebody, throw them in an office building and say, clean it. They actually go through a training regimen to be able to make sure that they're providing good customer service and stuff. So I was actually pleasantly surprised. I did not anticipate the kind of information that Gil provided, but after going over, I thought, geez, these guys are, wish I'd have had them in some of my buildings.
I think the big thing for us was the biggest complaint that we get are restrooms.
Yeah.
And that was one of our questions on the interview portion of it. And how do they handle that? And so all the restrooms get fitted with barcodes, so they get input from the daily users. You know, how did I do today? They do an airport, this company. They were one of the ones that modeled the program. You know, how was the restroom today when you're leaving the restroom? So that was refreshing to me, because a lot of times I get a lot of complaints on restrooms way after the fact. So, and the thing for us is it'll be nice for them to be getting that feedback real time, because then they have an opportunity to correct it. And we actually get to see that feedback.
Neil and his Michael from his team have been working on this RFP for quite some time, and he had shared with myself, and I think either Jeff or maybe it was Randy before, on the scope of services that are in the existing contract. And I think it's fair to say that not only the scope of service was probably much greater than we needed, but they also weren't being done. That's also on us. We're not managing the scope well, but I think going through and creating a very standardized approach is smart for us. It's very difficult to say, oh, in this particular office in this building, you do it differently. And there are a number of our departments who have done that over time and tried to create some, well, you need to clean my office, my garbage, my something separately. And that's not practical for an organization to be successful in doing that. So you may hear from certain departments that, hey, this is different from what I was getting before. Well, it's very intentional because we have to have this be cost-effective and consistent experience for all of our departments and all of the public spaces where our citizens come into. So I've witnessed the turnover, and it's understandable. It's a tough job to be in. So I think the individuals I've seen in the Public Works building, about every 2 to 3 months, there's a different person in there. So I do appreciate the retention part of it and giving a standardized approach, and the fact that we can save over $400,000 a year is really important for our known projected budget deficit. So
Just one couple final questions. So, I mean, personally, I do prefer that we have a briefing. As Commissioner Jordan was just saying, and then we have time to hear from the community, review ask any questions and then vote on it the next week. So I understand why I understand, but I would prefer have a week to review and then vote on it. But my questions were, do you, I don't see here that you check references. Do you do that?
Yes,
Part of the criteria?
yes.
Okay, and then did they present data then that show that they have a higher retention rate? Or how did they show that they are retaining workforce?
They did that in their presentations. Yeah, and we keyed in on, especially with this group, retention rates with these janitorial services really is not, there's about 90% turnover. That's pretty normal. This group, however, had about 16%. So they do retain quite a bit of staff. So those were the numbers that we keyed in on when they did their individual presentations.
So any further questions, because we're going long, so no. So I just say thank you. I appreciate it. It's, I look at this, I'm okay with it not being, in between, having it be today for the recent Tuesday and doing it. Because on a contract like this, we can get public input, but we're still gonna go with the bid that's most cost effective. Just like we do for most things. They went through the criteria prior to knowing what the bids were. So the process that they used is a very normal purchasing process for us for contracts. So I'm okay with, for the reasons you stated, turnover and all of that, doing it the same today.
Commissioner CUNY and I had a discussion about this, and again, Scott may have mentioned it a little bit. This is the standardized format that the facilities department controls. It is very vast. It's every one of our county facilities. The things that we could not control were specialized cleaning tasks or things of that nature, where we would just end up with an invoice and not know what it was for. I think that was more for, this will not only give us an opportunity for us to manage this, but for groups out there that require more than the standardized cleaning, they can actually bring those concerns to the board.
I've already had a department.
Okay.
So as we discussed today, so no,
and-
so I'm gonna have a conversation that they can do their own
Yep.
additional contracting that they want to do, and as part of their department budget, that is gonna go above and beyond what you're saying and we're allowing. So,
In my communications with the groups, we now have a ton of experience with this. If they need any help, they can always call.
thank you. Hey, George, we're gonna bring your group in.
I'm gonna sit down here
Okay.
and the folks that are gonna do the talking will be at the head of the table. So
There.
what we're doing right now is we're bringing to you all the recommendations that came through our most recent request for proposal. The recommendations the team's bringing to you came through the Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee. We met several months ago to make these recommendations. We've been delayed in taking these recommendations to you all because we have not had the allocation totals from our funders, Department of Commerce, Housing and Urban Development. So we're very close. We should have both of those primary funders allocations this week or next. So we felt it was appropriate now to bring these recommendations to you all. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris to bring it up and then
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for having us. I'll try to be as quick as we can. You'll see kind of on your front page of your briefing packet, we've got everything broken down into the funding intervention types as well as the funding sources. A total of $16.8 million allocated towards these specific funding or from these funding sources for the next approximately 2 years. There are some projects within these portfolios that are for different periods. The program managers will talk about that a little bit more. Of that 16.8, about 2 million for affordable housing projects, 4.7 for community development, and 9.8 for homeless services. So I'll turn it over to the program managers to kind of queue up what they've got going on. Then if you have any questions, of course, just let us know.
So I believe I'm first heading into this, so if we can go down to community development, thank you commissioners for meeting with us this morning. I really quickly wanted to touch on, oh, it's a little on. Would you mind?
One more down.
There we are. So basically, I wanted to go into a little bit of how the community development block grant is broken up. These are federal dollars provided by HUD to Spokane County. This is typically a yearly entitlement that is decided each fiscal year. So like George stated, we are expecting to receive our yearly fiscal entitlement either this week or next, and we'll have those numbers available to you sooner rather than later. The way that the community development block grant is broken out is that there is a 15% cap on public services for the year, and then everything else can be used towards capital, public works, infrastructure projects. We did something a little bit different this year in which our capital public works entitlement that we are expecting to receive this year, we are allocating 18-month contracts. That's typical. However, our public services contracts, to hopefully save up some administrative capacity, we are anticipating to allocate both this year and next year's public services cap to have essentially 2-year contracts for any subrecipients that we contract with. After this first year, we are planning to have some sort of monitoring / evaluation report at the end of the year and would come back to the commissioners to essentially showcase the results and ensure that the commissioners were okay re-upping that contract, effectively having 2 1-year contracts, but saving up a little bit of administrative capacity, both on our end and on our subrecipients. So that's why that number, $450,000, is actually kind of broken up in 2. There will be about $225,000 allocated towards projects this year and the other half next year. Approximately, we had about 17 applications for public services and about 8 applications for capital public works projects. Those far exceeded the numbers that we had available. So what you see here is the recommendation that the advisory committee had. So the funding priorities are available there. Those were in our request for proposal. Many of our applicants that we received hit at least one of those funding priorities. I would point out that childcare centers was not, along with That may be all in terms of the funding priorities themselves. On the screen there, which I know is in tiny print, but those are our capital public works projects that were recommended for funding. I will point out there is one specific exception in the 18-month contracts, which is the SNAP minor home repair program. That is very similarly to the public services, going to be a 2-year contract. So they were allocated $400,000. That'll be 200,000 of this year's entitlement, and next year's 200,000 of next year's entitlement, excuse me. So that is the only 2-year contract. The rest are 18 months. Those are Fairfield, Spangle, Greenhouse Facility Acquisition, and Partners in the Northwest Consolidated Resource Center. Are there any, I'll hold for if there are any questions on the capital side of the projects, if there are any.
I assume you do kind of a comparison to previous years of what was funded last time versus what's recommended this time? And then is there any kind of, as the advisory committee's gone through, any kind of ranking numbers or things like that that were determined at that stage for us to think about?
Yeah, so we did utilize, the advisory committee members did ask for any projects that were previously funded, which information was provided to them. We also did kind of a different ranking this year in which we essentially said to the advisory committee members, here's the R budget for HCD, allocate them however you would like to. And we essentially did the average of what all the members did so that they voted more with their dollars rather than an actual 1 through 100 score sheet. In that capacity, all the projects for capital that you see here were all the highest ranking applications. The 3 on the bottom were not funded in the capital stack.
So it's basically a vote of the advisory committee rather than I give this one a 90, this one a 70.
Correct.
So do you have a list that we could review of the projects from last time, just for historical perspective? The last RFP.
Absolutely. There are no other questions. I'll go on to the public services side of things. All the projects that you see available to you include the Medical Lake Food Bank acquisition, which is just purchasing some food to offset some costs. A critical needs program, Partners in the Northwest, Spokane County Meals on Wheels, the HBPA Costa Chondo Esperanza, the SNAP Financial Access Program, Manzanita House, Communities and Schools of Spokane County, and Mujeres in Action. I will point out that specifically all of these projects were funded in full, except for the Spokane County Meals on Wheels and the Partners with Families and Children that were subject to partial funding due to budget capacity. Were there any questions on the public services?
And it looks like communities and schools. Fully funded as well.
Correct. They were funded at about a third of their requested amount.
Another question. So when it says community development budget allocation, is that reflecting kind of the conversation we had a couple months ago where we kind of said we have this total amount of dollars and we want X percentage to go to homeless prevention or affordable housing? Is that aligned, or where does this number come from?
Completely separate. So,
Okay.
yeah, different funding source. So there may have been discussions on how to allocate CDBG or community development funding before.
Okay.
But those intervention types are not. So when you're seeing these public services kind of funding pieces of community development, that's almost supplemental to the discussions we've had for those 5 intervention types.
Okay.
I will also add that there is a HERE program, which is state funds. There was only one applicant, which was SNAP, and the HERE program is the home electrification and appliance rebates program. Thank you. That is in Brittany's side of things. This is technically in community development, but Brittany is taking over as our affordable housing program manager, and therefore she's also taking the HERE program with her. So it is still technically in the community development stack, but will be in the affordable housing program.
So quick question, following up on Commissioner Jordan's question. So do we have like written guidance to the board then for the we've spent a lot of time talking about the homeless dollars and, you know, with limited dollars, how we're gonna allocate to different needs in the community. And I'm sorry, I can't remember, do we have a similar guidance document that we provide the committee for recommendations around the, for these dollars?
Yes, ma'am. So similarly with homeless services, you'll see on just above these tables, we had these funding priorities that were development itself. So these are something that the BOCC can influence future funding and say, you know, our funding priorities are X. We want to fund food delivery or transportation vouchers for these three areas. I can't speak to how those discussions went. But those would be the.
Are they ranked or are they just in order? They're just listed.
Listed. These were the priorities that were put from the HCDAC to say, of all the projects that you've seen and provided your funding recommendations, we really want to make sure that there are no gaps in these areas.
Thanks.
So I'm assuming that was kind of informed by some of the community work that you've been doing on the RFC process overall.
The listening sessions that you had. Okay. Yep, great.
Yeah, we had 5 total listening sessions throughout Spokane County in each of your districts, helping to establish and set those priorities.
Thanks.
There are no other questions for community development. I'll hand it over to Brittany.
As Ada mentioned, I'll take over the affordable housing portfolio now that Pavel has left the county, as well as the HERE program and the minor home repair program. So if you have any questions about any of that, please reach out to me and I'll answer any questions you have. So for the affordable housing program that you see up here, we have it kind of broken down into 3 allocation categories: down payment assistance, new construction, and rehab. Those were the applications that were funded. There were priorities for tenant-based rental assistance as well, but we didn't receive any applications for that, so that wasn't shown in these funding priorities, or these funding allocations. So these funds are from HOME, which is the federal that we're still waiting on, as well as document recording fees and sales and use tax. We funded just over about 2 million for this 2025 allocation, and this will only be for a 1 year. We'll have to RFP next year for these funds again. Although you'll notice that in a lot of the affordable housing contracts, especially the long contracts that are longer than a year, but it's coming from that 1 year, that 2025 allocation. So you'll see the 4 projects that were funded. The down payment assistance for Habitat for Humanity, that one we've historically funded. It is a little bit of a reduced amount this year, not only from last year, but also from the requested amount for this year. You'll also see Highland Village Phase 3, which that will be a home loan. That one was funded in full. And then another funded in full was the Riverwalk Point rehab project. And then VOA North Pines, I don't know, I think it's the other document that you have that shows a 706 or 7 something number. That one is incorrect. That is what the HCDAC recommended. However, due to our funding availability and the type of funding that we used for that project, we had to reduce that down to the 500K. I believe the one that you might have in front of you is actually the 500K, so that should be correct. So that's just one little note, a little change there. And that one is a loan with local funding, document recording fees. Are there any questions on any of these projects?
So what were some of the criteria you used to vet the different construction projects? Because I know there's very limited funds in the home account. And so it's probably very competitive, right, with the different applications. So what I mean, obviously Highland Village is a great project and they've been really, you know, meeting a lot of goals of the county for affordable housing, but was there, how did you balance the other requests for new construction?
Yeah, that was mainly on the HCDAC side, so I can't speak a ton to their thoughts, but from my knowledge of what they were saying and the discussion that happened, trying to preserve any existing affordable housing units is a big priority. As y'all know, that is a more cost-effective way of keeping more affordable housing units in our community. So I know that that was a big priority. So when you're looking at some of these projects like Riverwalk Point, that's a rehab project, and that is a 51 unit project that we're essentially keeping alive, then that was a big priority for them. East Buckeye Highland Village, we know the history of that project is doing well. So when HCDAC sees those projects come back to us, I would assume are more likely to fund those because they see that positive history there. VOA is a incomplete stack, so I can't speak too much to that one. And I mean, George, maybe have some better idea.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we really look for is site control when we start talking about affordable housing. Because a lot of folks have an idea of what they'd like to do if they got a bunch of money. So we look for site control first and foremost. And then secondly, what does their entirety of a capital stack look like? It's not uncommon for some of these projects to have capital stacks exceeding $20-30 million. And if they're not even halfway there, then that's something that we want the advisory committee folks to take a look at and say, what's our level of confidence that we'll be able to get across the finish line within a reasonable contract period.
And I know, we're entering into a new agreement around homeless dollars to try and be more coordinated with our fellow cities. Is there coordination going on with some of these projects with the city of Spokane and what they might be contributing to? Just to see if we're be able to bring a project to fruition rather than just partial funding?
Yeah, so absolutely. We've been talking with the city of Spokane as well as the city of the Valley. The city of the Valley, we met with them, Brittany, 2-3 weeks ago to talk about their sales and use tax for affordable housing and talked about some of the different projects that we have going on there and where there might be some opportunity to overlap or fill some of the gaps that some of our other projects that we funded in the Valley can be supported. The city of Spokane is a little unique in that the city of Spokane has home dollars that must be used in their jurisdiction. Our home dollars can't be used inside their jurisdiction. So we get a little wonky, but once we get into sales and use tax, document recording fees, those sorts of things, then we find partnerships where we can with those funds.
Thanks.
Going back to my question last time, was the conversation where we gave certain percentages to different buckets, was that only homeless service dollars? So not affordable housing?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Speak of homeless services projects.
Yeah.
We've talked with many of y'all about our funding plan and priorities for this upcoming biennium or 2-year cycle. So what's in front of you is based on the HCDAC budget allocations that were given to them after talking with the BOCC. These goals are a little under those budget allocations. So we wanted to increase transitional housing funding, increase rapid rehousing funding, get homeless prevention a little bit higher, reduce the emergency shelter funding. And then we wanted to increase the accountability measures in these projects as well as prioritize a couple of specific subpopulations. I will say that all of these were in very close to being taken care of. Sans the 6C item, no projects that were intending on serving veterans specifically applied for these funds. So I can talk about a little bit of that offline if needed. But as far as the percentages, to Commissioner Jordan's point, transitional housing, we were able to get up from around 10 to 14.5. We wanted about 20. We got rapid rehousing up to about 14.3. That's what we wanted to be at 15. Homeless prevention, we wanted to be above 30. We're about 38 right now, which is great. And then we wanted to reduce emergency shelter to be a little bit more representative of the services that we're doing. And we got 28.2% there, which is just under that goal of 30%. I will say that these percentages are based on the $9.8 million that's in that table. The allocation that we're anticipating receiving from Commerce is $14 million. So there is going to be a little bit of pushing and pulling a couple of these contracts to see where we need to fund them from. These are just those initial allocations. Emergency shelter projects, the list is in front of you. I'll just highlight a couple of projects that were reduced. So the YWCA received a reduced award based on what they asked for, and the Family Promise Shelter received a reduced award based on what they asked. As far as homeless prevention projects, we've got a couple of rural projects we're continuing to fund, or we're continuing to recommend funding to Cheney Outreach Center and Medical Lake Community Outreach. These have been two rural projects that we've been funding for the last couple of years that have been operating really great. We've got some reduced funding for Family Promise of Spokane and SNAP Singles Targeted Eviction Prevention. I will note, just like the funding allocation, that we did receive more funds than we anticipated receiving. So a lot of these alternate projects that you'll see on the Excel spreadsheet in your documents, we're probably gonna have to go back to those projects and recommend some of those receive funding as well. So more to come on that. The rapid rehousing projects, only 2 were funded, but 2 projects that we funded in the past, and they're really high performing projects, St. Margaret's and SNAP. And then we really got a good haul of transitional housing projects, which were a key focus for us this biennium. A couple of reductions in what was asked, specifically Salvation Army stepping stones. And you'll notice, I believe, I moved it, so that's good. We've got the Way Out Center that we're also funding. They applied as a transitional housing project, more of an emergency shelter project. I moved that after the fact, talked about them since. But that was in the transitional housing stack as well. That's also why our transitional housing is a little lower than we originally allocated. Other than, please, yes.
So on the rapid rehousing, the SNAP singles, rapid rehousing, and eviction prevention. Just lost that. Oh, there it is. Under homeless prevention, you got singles targeted eviction prevention. With the latest legislation that's been passed and will probably get signed by the governor, the probability of evictions is drastically reduced. And so I'm wondering if that legislation was factored in terms of identifying the number or the dollar amount that you have dedicated to this versus another category that might have a greater risk of. So just more for my education than it is advocacy, but I'm just looking to see, is there alignment between what the state did and how we're allocating the funds?
So I will say, no, sir, that wasn't taken into consideration in the proposed need for homeless prevention dollars in the region. I will say that homeless prevention dollars are specific to those who are eligible, meaning simply because it will be harder for folks to be evicted when they are on the verge of becoming evicted is when they become eligible. So I think we'd probably be able to see over the next 2 years if there's a significant, or maybe even the next year, if there's a significant reduction in eviction prevention. I'll be coming back to this group and saying, hey, we're not spending eviction prevention at the same rate that we thought we would. Should we reallocate these funds to a more appropriate project? And that's that accountability piece that we've been talking about over the last couple of months as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Question about the Way Out shelter. The county contributes already through an agreement, right? 500,000 a year. So is this in addition to that?
It is, yes.
Okay.
So a little bit of context on the Way Out Center is we do provide document recording fees to that project. The city of Spokane also does that. Originally, that project was slated for 3 different funding sources, and they lost that third leg of the stool. So they're only getting county and city funding, which is not their total costs for that project. So this was that supplemental funding to make them whole. Hey, if we receive this funding, we'd be able to serve more people and we'd be able to recoup all of our costs as opposed to operating in the negative a little bit. So these are specifically I guess I should say, supplemental funding agreement in addition to the $500,000 per year.
And on that, it was a private business that was foundation that was looking at doing it, and then they chose a different path. And is the city still contributing at that 500,000? Because I know there was discussions whether they were or not.
They still are, and we've had great conversations. We actually met on site with the city and Salvation Army a few months back, just to talk about their project and how everything's going, the funding streams, their intervention type, transitional housing versus emergency shelter. So good things happening, really good cooperation with the city. Just understand that it's expensive to run a shelter.
Yeah, no, and I was there recently, and it's they really are doing a great job of helping people transition from homelessness to getting them able to get into another apartment.
I personally think that diversity in funding is really important to, this move on strategy that we're talking about of getting folks out of certain categories to the next. I think that's good. Really well.
I think one other important caveat here is that the existing contract that the county has with the Salvation Army will expire within this 2-year contract period. So this is also picking up a gap following that.
Yeah, I guess my concern was that our goal was to, I mean, it's hard. There's a lot of great projects, but I don't know how many people they're serving through the Way Out shelter, but we had said we wanted to prioritize projects with children, households with children, or veterans. And we also wanted to, yeah, so, and we wanted to, it's hard. There's not gonna be perfect, but I was just wondering why, Family Promise is getting it's getting recommended at a high number, but not at what they requested, and that is, the only family sheltered program that applied in that category, I believe.
I think that's a fantastic point, and I'll say that none of the projects, the priorities that were not met were funded. How do I say this? Projects were not funded in lieu of those projects. We're not missing any priorities because we're funding another project. We did try to reduce emergency shelter funding, and so when we're talking about the Way Out getting, 2 awards, but we're reducing the award for eviction prevention project. Totally understand that. I also should mention though that eviction prevention, there's going to be additional dollars coming to the county in that category. So the Family Promises, the SNAPs that are receiving reduced awards in eviction prevention may not be receiving reduced awards. That category is just specific. We have to stay in eviction prevention. So we can't pull out of eviction prevention and put it into just the Way Out, for instance. So it's hard. We're talking about homelessness prevention and all of these other categories. That one has to stay on its own.
So where is that? Where is the eviction prevention section?
So right before outreach, I think it was, I'm sorry, right before rapid rehousing. So homelessness prevention, all of these projects, I know it's kind of word soup, is funded from the eviction prevention funding source from the consolidated homeless grant. That cannot go anywhere else.
So Family Promise got $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Which is.
And this total amount of eviction prevention is not what we're anticipating receiving in anticipated funds. So we're getting more.
So you're anticipating that you'll be able to put out more homelessness prevention funds? Okay, when they are keeping people housed rather than waiting for families to have to enter the shelter, it's just way less expensive and less traumatic for kids. So I appreciate the work they're doing, and if there's more funds coming, that's great.
Family Promise is listed as an alternate for additional funding and eviction prevention should we have got it. And I'll also note that that's BOCC recommendation if that's the will of the board to prioritize that project.
I think before the will of the board, we need to have a discussion on that, so.
Absolutely.
Because I think $1.5 million going to Family Promise for prevention is a lot of dollars. And so I'd like to see what they're doing in comparison to others. And if you haven't been to Salvation Army, see the Way Out shelter, I mean, they serve 60 people. So 30, I think, on the emergency side, and 30 on the as they transition into their transitional side. And we know, in homeless, getting them in emergency sheltering, but then having them in a transitional space to help learn those skills is necessary, and not everybody, all these organizations do that. And so I think, having those 30 people in that transitional space to learn the skills before they go into an apartment is key. Because otherwise we hear a lot of organizations, I've heard a lot of them, they put them into an apartment too soon. And then there's damage that's done, costs more money. So I think having that transitional space, I feel has done a really good job with that. And getting those people through that.
I think another important conversation that the advisory committee has had is the proportionality of funding to the populations. So when you think back to when the city was here several weeks back and they were talking about the longitudinal data, you can see that the number of homeless families versus the number of homeless individuals, there's a very different number of folks that are in the system there. So that's been something that we've been trying to look at as we're allocating those resources, is really trying to hit those needs and the proportionality of folks that have those needs. So that was something that the advisory committee considered as well.
Just a clarification on the list, are they ranked, you may have said this, are they ranked in order of how they were recommended by the advisory committee?
That's a great question. I honestly don't know.
Or alphabetical?
Yeah, I don't know. This is 3 spreadsheets later, so I'll have to look at the, I can get you. I don't want to go too far into the ranking unless you guys want to hear about it, but I can get you the list of the rankings as well.
Okay.
Percentage of the funded as well.
And then on the homeless services dollars, when we had the previous kind of full board priority conversation, there was a dollar amount we were expecting with the, assuming the governor signs the budget. How do we do relative to that? It sounds like you're thinking we might expect to see some more of certain
Yes,
buckets.
I would say overall, we are receiving more than we anticipated receiving and on par, if not more, last week.
And for reference, we had a phone call with the Department of Commerce last week, end of last week. So we have an approximation of what our allocation looks like. We don't have a letter formally stating this is what you spoke in. So once we get that, we'll bring that to y'all and get your approval to enter into that contract.
For me, it'd be helpful to see the comparison to last year and then the comparison to what you previously projected, just to get a sense of the numbers. But that sounds good.
Yes.
Sounds like it could have been worse.
Yeah, we were told to budget a 20% reduction, which we did. And it doesn't look like we're gonna have that.
Provide that information. And then last, I just wanted to note the project that were not recommended for funding. If anyone has any questions about those projects. Really, these all were projects that were that were eligible, that just scored us projects like in those rating ratings. Questions on the services projects? I think George kind of said this, but as we receive those funding, those award letters, those come before the VOCC for signature, and then subsequently we would fund these projects. We'll be starting July 1st.
One more clarification on homeless prevention, medical aid, community outreach, and Cheney outreach. So that is homeless prevention, not outreach.
Correct.
That's just the name of their.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
Thank you very much. Oh, Scott.
Just a quick, also clarification, Chris and team. There's a set of projects that are being recommended for funding for 2 years. There's a set that are 1 year, right? So all of the CHG dollars and homeless dollars are 2 years.
Yes,
Affordable housing is 1 year. And everything in the community development is 1 year except for the public services. That's 2 years, is that right? Correct. Okay. So there'll be an opportunity.
Program as well.
And the HERO program, yeah, and that's tied to the state dollars. So to some of the commissioners' questions around further getting involved with helping to prioritize some of these other dollars, that can be another opportunity in next year or the affordable housing and for some of the community development dollars, just to make sure there's alignment with what the board is prioritizing and what the committees then evaluating those priorities on.
And lastly, I'll just state with regards to grants and the county's financial situation, everything, the Housing and Community Development Department is very solvent. We've got the resources to be able to pay for ourselves without needing general fund dollars to support any of this as well. So we're in a good position. We were in a strong and lean crew, so just for reference.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna just keep moving along here. So, Sandra.
That's excellent. I guess.
Okay. Ready to go here at this point.
Morning, commissioners. We have 3 or 4 items for you this morning. I'll try to make up a little bit of schedule time and get through it. I think the first one is Sandra's. Well, you do not recognize Sandra Anthony. She's our program manager in wastewater. She's briefing you about easement.
So I'm going to talk to you about an easement. Spokane County currently has an easement for a sewer line that runs through some property that the city of Spokane owns, city of Spokane Valley. And the city of Spokane Valley is developing that property into a cross-country venue with a cross-country running course on it. And as part of that development, the easement that we have for our sewer line and access to the sewer line just needs to be revised slightly to make the property more useful for them, for their venue. We've worked with the city of Spokane Valley and come to an agreement as far as what would be acceptable for the access portion of the easement, as well as the portion that the sewer line is physically located within. And so today we're just bringing to you that change. So we'd like to terminate the current easement that we have. So this page that you're seeing right now shows the current access easement shown in the kind of the red hatch there. And then the yellow hatch depicts where we have what's labeled as a sewer and access easement. So currently maintenance crews will come off of Flora Road there, which is on the left-hand side, drive up the access, be able to access the sewer lines, and then go down to the far east end, which is on the right-hand side, and turn around and then exit the property. Again, like I said, with them developing the property, those access points get in the way of their venue. So on the next slide, oh, sorry.
Would you orient me with that drawing and the aerial on the previous page? Because I'm having difficulty aligning those two exhibits together.
Absolutely. Would it help if I pointed to it up on the screen there?
Whatever you would like to do.
Absolutely. So this is Flora Road here, running north and south. Euclid runs this way, this way. The property that the city of Spokane Valley owns is this chunk here. There's 3 parcels, one here, and one here. And so the part that's highlighted on those next pages that you have, the road, you can just barely kind of see in this aerial, comes up in this curved fashion right here, goes along the north edge of the property, and then there's this half of a hammerhead type of turn, or excuse me, cul-de-sac type turnaround that you see here in the aerial. So on the next slide here, those represent this curved approach in. The sewer line runs along the north side, and then the turnaround that currently exists is like this.
That helped dramatically. Thank you.
Wonderful. And then I'll stay here for just a minute if you want to go to the next slide, and I'll point. So what the city of Spokane Valley is proposing is to change so that curved access becomes more of this straight in. They're going to pave this access. This part leads into their parking lot. So it'll coincide with where they've got paved areas. And then this is a driveway. This is very similar to what you saw before. As far as that's where the sewer line exists right now. So that part will stay. But previously that turnaround that you're seeing there was located, it was about here. So they just need to push it a little bit further to the east to get out of their starting chute for the cross-country venue and get it to a point where it makes sense for their operations. So it still works basically the same for us as far as getting in, getting out, getting access to the manholes that we have there, but just is tweaked a little bit to allow them to develop their venue.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Okay. So the next item is similar, another easement. It's with the West Valley School District. So very similar, we have an easement across the Pasadena Park Elementary School site. And so in the highlighted yellow is the overall site. The red line that goes through the middle is where our sewer main runs through, and we have an existing easement over the sewer. And back in 1991, 2000 or so, when the sewer was built, there was certain easement access routes, and things have changed. So the school district has done various additions and improvements on their site, and so our access has gotten cut off to one of the manholes, and so they expanded their kind of on the west side of their property. They expanded that building recently, and so we had to have them add or change the easement for the access for a turnaround kind of between the buildings or between the additions to the building. So if you go to the next slide, that's the old existing easement that we've had. And now there's a building that sits over portions of that. And it was wider really than it needed to be. And so if you go to the next slide, it shows where we will now have a 20-foot easement over the sewer line. And then on the right-hand side, there's a crosshatched area that shows our new access easement alignment, so we can get to a manhole that's on site. And so again, we worked with West Valley architect, their architect, and then our attorneys worked with their attorneys to get the easement language sorted out. So very, very similar to Sandra's easement. Is there any questions on that?
So does the pipe still fit into the new easement?
It does. The new easement is centered right on the pipe like it should be, and then again, just fits the new site better with the crosshatched access easement. It's like we're always defending our easements that we have. People are trying to build stuff on them all the time, and yeah, it's kind of a constant battle. But these ones were pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is lift reimbursement out in Liberty Lake. Another one of these, we've had several come across for the board's consideration in the past. This is another one throughout the new development area there, that kind of river campus area in Liberty Lake. All right. Well, good morning. I think it's still morning. Yeah. We're good. This is one more request, as Kyle said, submitted by the city of Liberty Lake, and that's on behalf of Western States Equipment Company. Next one. So this is just kind of where we're sitting with the TIF and lift accounts. You can see our fund balance as of tax day was TIF 6 million and lift 4.1 million. These requests are 30% TIF funds, which is 176,000, lift funds 70% for 412. The total request is 589,000. And the next slide, you can see what they're getting paid for. This is the extension of Cataldo, and this is that freeway frontage road. And really, it's the frontage down to and including Western States with their new building there along I-90. And happy to answer any questions regarding it. We have received a package from them. We've reviewed the construction in the package. Everything appeared in order. We think it's appropriate to pay towards that.
For the board's awareness of mine as well, that how is the determination of how much comes out of TIF, how much comes out of lift. I believe Liberty Lake determines how they want those funds to come out. And it's all under our. With them.
Thank you. Todd. You're up next. You guys have. Yeah. It's all of you. Should have thought through that.
Okay. If you wanna take one of these, pass it around, meet in the middle. So we have two documents today to present. One is the communications plan for the APA. The other is a draft fact sheet. If we have time, we can get to that. And I have various communications updates I can save for later, give you individually. The communications draft coming around should look familiar. This has been reviewed by Kyle, Scott, the executive team, Ben and Amy from Public Works and Legal. But it is still, both these documents are in draft form. So we're here today to get your feedback and ideas. As we go out, we've already sent out the press release for the renewal and expansion of the APA. The document outlines some of the goals. This is primarily dealing with our public education efforts for the APA. We contemplate the audiences, of course, the general public, but we know this will primarily affect those that pay the fee within the APA boundary. We talk about reaching out to local media, some consideration to various environmental groups or educators that Water Resources is already working with, school districts, et cetera. The local government officials and community leaders within the boundary jurisdictions that have joined us, and then community and neighborhood associations are all primary audiences that we have identified. Be important to communicate these messages to. Some of the top messages that we are recommending is what is the actual request to voters. And so you'll see there, they will get to decide whether or not to renew and expand the APA and the imposition of fees, which funds our efforts and local jurisdictions efforts around aquifer protection and regional water quality efforts. Another top message is protecting our primary source of drinking water. We've played with and kind of revised the sole source messaging, knowing that the APA and the boundary is really about those on top of the aquifer. There are others in the region that do rely on the water that comes from the aquifer, but we're still refining that. I think the word primary source makes sense. For some people who run wells and other aquifers aren't affected by this or don't see this as their sole source aquifer. So trying to avoid confusion there. We are recommending a message of this being a 20-year community investment. Along with that investment, of course, comes when people actually pay. Most common question we get in these ballot measures is, how much do I pay and what's it for and who pays it? Do I pay it? Does this even affect me? So we have some dollar amounts there. It's $1.25 per month for those connected to water, like city water in the city. $1.25 those who are on septic systems. If you have a well, you don't pay it, correct? You do pay, right? Okay. Okay. So we're working on refining the average amount. I think Kyle said it's like $22, roughly $22. The maximum anyone can pay is $30 annually. But there's only about 25% of people within the boundary that pay both. So up to that $30 amount. Some only pay 15, on the septic side, some only pay 15 on the water side. We did think it was important to communicate that, but
I don't know if I'd use an average amount, because nobody is going to pay $22, right? You're either gonna pay 15 or you're gonna pay 30.
Right.
I just be honest and tell, it's 15 if you're, or it's 30 if you're on a septic, it's 15 if you're not. I mean, saying an average of 22, nobody's paying 22, so we might just wanna be clear on how statement actually
And most of the
works.
people that are gonna be paying this are paying the $15.
Yeah.
The percentage that are on water versus on septic.
Instead of saying the hours, we say that the majority of folks will pay 15.
Yeah, I would say that.
I would think that would be better.
With a little asterisk. Some are.
And if you have a vacant lot, do you pay anything? Okay. Even though you rely on the aquifer, for clean water and stuff.
Yeah, so the fee is for the use of the water, so a vacant lot isn't using the water.
Right.
And that's why someone on a well versus on a water system both pay because they are using water and.
Right. Okay.
And we'll come back to these messages again a little bit more and refine them in the fact sheet. We talk about funding necessary programs in addition to how the boundary has changed over time. The necessary programs, we really get into the total dollar amounts being collected, what the funds are dedicated to, water quality monitoring, pollution prevention, community education, and aquifer protection. I think the total dollar amount collected is going to be 3.3 million. The split there is 1.5. I think it's what we're getting now, but with the inclusion of the city, that will generate another 1.8 million. City of Spokane, that is. We are recommending talking about the APA helping to address emerging threats. You know, PFAS is an issue throughout the county. It's also an issue, I think, in the city of Spokane, some of their water. Talk about climate change impacts around water availability, urban and industrial development pressures and water resources as the region's growing. Trying to manage those resources responsibly. And then, of course, the key question about if this is not reviewed, if it is not renewed, what happens? And we talked there about needing to find alternative funding sources, potentially leading to reduced services or cuts to other programs to make up the difference. So we can have a more robust conversation on the key messages, but I wanted to get into the options for you all to consider, kind of a menu. Should be familiar based on normal and regular things that we've done in the past. Go ahead.
Just wondering about word necessary programs as to whether that is an educational or a advocacy type word. I'm just kind of thinking back to the Measure One discussions about obviously trying to keep things educational. So just flagging that word might be something that.
I flagged it as well. I was having a question in my own mind whether that was.
Yeah, Jim had struck the word essential and replaced it with the word necessary.
Getting there.
In addition to like school and primary.
I wouldn't disagree with Jim. I just wanted to raise that.
Critical.
I'm sure it's been wordsmithed significantly.
And the PDC regulation talks about emotionally provocative. Jim said the word essential is to him is very emotionally provocative.
I am the older.
Thank you, thank you. That was like a softball for you.
It was, and I'm just thinking, do I hit it or not?
You might, I mean, PFAS is somewhat of a known term, but you could just say, contaminants, chemicals. You know, you could use more generic, like forever chemicals or other terms too. Anyway, I just in case some
Toxins.
people might not know.
General toxins.
Toxins, emerging. Anyway,
Like 6 people.
or you could add that such as, you could use PFAS and then as an example.
So, and I'm wondering whether, you know, it's not just emerging threats, it's existing threats.
Right.
And stuff, so.
Actually, yeah, addressing emerging and existing threats would be the title.
Then I'll throw it out here. I think you can make the point with regard to impacts of water availability without relating it to climate change, because I know in part of the county, you know, they're still not buying into climate change, but water availability, regardless of the cause, is still an issue. And so I'm wondering if maybe you get less pushback If you eliminate that reference and just go impacts of water availability.
It could affect things like, I don't know, snowpack plays into it or
Yep.
other things, which
Upstream users, a variety of things.
okay, we'll make that a little more generic and then we'll keep in, everyone's good with urban industrial development pressures, growth, and going on conference plan. Okay. All right, getting into the menu here, and this will reference the fact card, and I'll clarify what we mean by fact card and fact sheet. In the past, we have stood up a webpage. There's already an existing APA webpage, several actually. We may try and condense this, so when people search the word APA, if they're looking at their ballot or hearing, seeing, reading, or hearing something about it, they come to the page that we're designing for the educational effort. So there's some suggestions in the fact sheet that we'll review next about just trying to winnow down where people are pointed to. We traditionally have done a video and both efforts in the past just had an explanatory video, what it is. We can do that again. The internal cost, this one's an internal cost, is probably about $5,000. Don't contract it out. You know, we do it with any resources, webpage and video. Cost, it would just be absorbed from communications budget. The fact card mail piece, this is something we definitely need direction and guidance on. This is the concise, informative material that would go out to all the residents within the APA boundary. Now we have to list the precincts. It was interesting to me, the number of precincts that are in unincorporated Spokane County. It's actually relatively small versus the amount of precincts that are in a city jurisdiction. The comment has come up in the discussion about who would foot the bill for the mailer. Would you all want to engage with the other mayors and councils to encourage? Obviously, we can on the staff level if that's your direction, if we're going towards a fact card mail piece. But would they pay for their share of a mailer or would they do their own based on the one that we do? Or should we try and just blanket and cover the cost of the mailer? They're certainly getting funds and revenues from the fees that they're using towards their programs.
I would say we were reaching out to, I mean, you guys, you can reach out first and then we can follow up, but I would say it'd be worth reaching out to see if they would just do one joint one. Just have it be, you know. Yeah, and during the cost sharing, but just have all the jurisdictions on it at the bottom. Choosing to, you know, and sharing the cost of it. You know, Russian during these things like.
No,
that.
I think we should ask them to chip in for that, and it could start with staff. I was just thinking, I don't know, I'm just wondering. Don't want to make it too complicated, but if the valley has like a specific intent for some of its dollars, would it make sense to say this is the valley mailer, this is the city mailer, and this is the unincorporated? They're all very similar, but maybe slightly tweaked. I don't, just a thought, making a little more tailored information.
Yeah, I would say if they put it in there, the utility bills would be the place to do that. Because that's just to their citizens, but a mail piece to go out. And you know, to the area. I would say just a one that is more generic, but then has each of the jurisdictions logo on the bottom. And again, just shows that we're working together as a community.
Just one comment on that, in that since we are the sewer purveyor for the valley, I don't know how much distinction we would have at the utility billing level for unincorporated and incorporated. We'll have to look into that and see if we can do a separate one.
We could just do one that does combine us and specifically with valleys. I mean, readers can determine if they're in the valley or not, but maybe that would be the way to do it. Yeah.
I think what we'll do is at the staff level, just test the level of effort that we think others will be expending. And then get back to you on some additional recommendations if we need to carry more of it or ask them to participate. But we haven't, maybe you've had some conversations, or I mean, there have been some conversations as these ILAs or resolutions have been getting passed and the staff has been out presenting to various city councils. So we can test that and report back about what staff are saying anyways.
Well, I'm hoping that, some of the organizations that are in favor of it, that are not us, that can advocate, would be willing to put materials out. We do a video, like the River Keepers, do a video or something that. Can we link to something like that from our website or not?
No, but once we put the website up, make the video and our assets available, they're in the public domain. And so I don't think, other than using our logo, which they shouldn't do, they could take whatever information we provide or create their own. And at that point, it's in the wild and outside of our reach. So the fact card mail piece, I have in here a very rough estimate of what it's cost to mail countywide. Of course, this is only 123,000 or so parcels we're talking about, just a fraction of the total countywide mailer. In the past, that's been 250,000. So we're looking at about half that cost if we were to do an APA wide with potential cost sharing. So we'd be looking at $35,000 to $40,000 range expenditure there. The utility bill inserts, to do all of our utility bill inserts for public works, that's been in the $1,500 to $2,000 range. So there would be a cost to that. It would be a condensed version of the fact card mail piece, or the fact sheet one pager, I call it. In front of you, and we'll come to this quickly, is the fact sheet, which you're, just one item here. We'll confirm legal, but in the initial review of it, because these are educational related materials, that does fit within the RCW of eligible for our use of our APA funds. So we don't have to pay for that out of the general fund. Make sure we're crispy clean on that, but this is an educational effort.
To your sewer customers.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
And whether it's the fact sheet or the utility billing insert or the video, it's all for protection area. Make sure we're crispy clean on that, but it should be all.
Crispy clean. Is that a legal phrase?
I got a term of art.
Jim's term is scrub, so crispy clean is pretty close to scrub.
Okay.
I wasn't sure if it was a good sign for Jim to come in at this very moment. Yeah, I'm wondering what I didn't do.
Crispy clean is not a emotionally charged term.
It's neutral and fair. And
Yeah. Detected a disturbance in the force. All right, so we'll circle back to the fact sheet. I have some other items we need to get to as well. Normal and regular, I would say in the past, we have created a PowerPoint presentation. If somebody was invited by a local group or a public meeting, something you already attending, a neighborhood, something that you're already doing. Again, that would be for educational purposes. Jim has a great primer on how you can handle other requests that might come in of groups, how things can get on your calendar. I will say, and we learned this in the juvenile effort, the PDC expressly prohibits speakers bureaus. A centralized speakers bureau is perceived as advocacy. So very similar with the juvenile effort. If the commissioner desires, we would provide you, the materials we have, or you can go to the website and get them, and it would kind of be explore on your own, but not communications office sending you to this or that group to go get these or that points. Good groups though that have requested speakers in the past, and again, not for a debate or a forum, just for an educational presentation, or chambers of commerce, again, your neighborhood association, especially in areas where this is an expansion. I haven't seen this in the last 20 years, and they might want to know what this is all about. Those type of things. Something we have not done in the past, but other jurisdictions have started doing, is hosting online forums. The city of Spokane, for its effort last fall, had a series of Zoom meetings, kind of community engagement meetings. They were official meetings of the city. And we've talked a little bit about what that could look like, hosting a large public webinar in evening times when people are available to educate and answer questions on the measure. Not advocating yes or no, just telling them what it is. But it would be, I think the first time we've done it for this purpose, we certainly are on Zoom now and host Zoom. But for a ballot measure, I'm not sure that we've attempted with it before. So find a little bit of new growth for us. And of course, social media, getting information out as we've done in the past. Already done some press release and media outreach and had some coverage. Providing access to some of our experts. And then email newsletters to the extent you all have official county commissioner email newsletters. I think the city has a very large list of its utility payers and they routinely put in information about upcoming ballot measures in there. So then we have the timeline, of course, for post announcement. And so I think in terms of spokespeople, this is all the way down at the bottom, but we'd identified public works staff, Kyle, Amy, and Ben, commissioners, other local elected officials that might might want to speak in the community on this. And then we mentioned here environmental scientists or hydrologists, people with professional credentials who know this stuff inside and out, faculty, academics, researchers, educators, volunteers that have attended our educational programs. This one, we had some additional materials that we were contemplating from Amy's department about all the people that go through our educational programs at Doris Morrison or Water Resources Center. But we're going to put a pin in that for now. We got some feedback from legal. If we haven't done that before and we haven't included that kind of information, it might seem a little bit out of step now. So we're putting a pin in that for now.
How about providing links for us to be able to post on our Facebook page, post our newsletters? Is that acceptable and can you do that?
I think if you've done it before for past measures, it should be.
We have. I don't know if others have, but we have.
And just the educational links, not necessarily outside commentary and op-eds and things like that. Just our information you should be good to share.
Yeah, like the web page and video,
Yeah.
that is a county produced product. I would think we'd be able to share that on our county Facebook pages.
Right.
No problem.
But you wouldn't want to share like a newspaper editorial endorsing a yes vote or something.
And I think putting together a PowerPoint would be great because we can use it, other electeds can use it for jurisdictions. It's just a generic PowerPoint. Because I can foresee, yes, all the chambers usually want us to come and speak to whatever's on the ballot. So that has historically been happened. So having that, for us to be able to do that. That way, it's been scrubbed.
And reviewed, sent to legal, crispy clean, scrub. Okay. So we'll be tracking media coverage, engagement metrics, and feedback. Moving to the fact sheet, if there's no more questions on the actual plan. The fact sheet does a lot of the heavy lifting for us because this is essentially what all derivative materials, video, website, the fact card mail piece. Sounds like you will probably proceed on that. The social media posts, the utility inserts, everything will be a condensed version of what's in the fact sheet. The website, this will be the primary content for the informational page that we look to stand up. This has been reviewed again by the executive team, by public works staff, and by legal, but it probably needs at least one or two more passes. So what I'll do with this, instead of going over plan to go now, if you have comments, maybe by the end of the week, written comments or email would be fine. We got the feedback on changing the average. I heard that. PFAS, forever chemicals, I've got a note on that. This is pretty basic information.
The current threats too.
Yes, yep, and I'll add that to the fact sheet too. Assessing emerging and current threats. If there's nothing more on that, I just have a couple quick updates.
Just a thought, is the city having conversations of Spokane, having conversations about how they might spend some of their dollars? Because I was just thinking they might also want to talk about directly to their city voters.
Clean air.
Since it's new back on the ballot for city voters, how they want to spend their dollars. So, but if they do their own we don't wanna have too many fact sheets out there. But if they wanted to expand upon that, it could either be integrated into the one website with links, or their website could link to our website or whatever, but I'm just thinking they might wanna have some more detail for their voters, since voters haven't in the city, haven't seen this for 20 years.
I think what we'll do.
Just a thought that
Sure.
that might be helpful to folks who are now being integrated into the new boundary.
I think when we get your feedback on the fact sheet, the next step will be to circulate it to all of our counterparts at Millwood, Liberty Lake. Aaron Hutt, Lisa Gardner at the city.
I could even see like on the website, you have all your facts and some photos. And then you could have like the city of Spokane, if they had their own, you could link to it, or the city of the valley, link to it, because they may want to highlight some different projects that would be of interest to their voters.
Well, we know their uses are in addition to how we use the money. I mean, we use it relatively narrowly
Right,
now.
right.
They have a much more categories they can spend it on.
Right. So just a thought.
It's great. All right,
So
that's
get
it.
you feedback by,
End of the week would be good.
Okay.
I think.
do you have this in a digital?
I'll circulate this and the.
My only thought would be if there's ways to get information, like a fact sheet out before the end of the school year, that would be helpful. You know, just because once school's out, you lose maybe some audience there of voters and families and people who use the educational resources.
Okay, general communication updates under miscellaneous. Madam Chair, we're going to move there.
Yes.
Okay, proclamations, for awareness, the bench has requested for the courthouse to be lit up. They've worked with Gil in green, since we already have the color green for Therapeutic Courts Month. So it sounds like that's happening. The courts also sent out a release, and Sharissa has worked with them to help them film a video about the therapeutic courts and specialty courts. So that's just for awareness that's happening. Two proclamations today: Provider Appreciation and Public Works Week. And so those will be before you today with Kyle and a representative from the providers coming. And we have the speakers lined up for that. I believe it's Commissioner French reading the Provider Appreciation one and the Vice Chair reading the Public Works one. Is that correct? Sound good? Okay.
So if I can make sure that I have it.
The table, yeah.
Yes, who's saying what and who's.
Receiving it.
Yes.
But we'll work with the clerk to get that to you. Next week, we said yesterday, we will work on the G-Prep draft for the sports team to be presented by Commissioner, one of the commissioners. I think it's Commissioner Jordan, who's going to do double duty, and then CV. I think CV will be coming to receive theirs
20th.
on the 20th. Yeah. Is that next week?
Next.
Yes.
Yeah, it is next week.
That's next week. Coming up quick. On the press release front, I have continued focus on the use of opioid settlement funds coming out of the city county meeting. I know there's some other projects that Justin has in the works. I did want to let you know we had a request from a media outlet on red light status in the jail. Some very robust data around that that was provided yesterday. So anticipating a story, when I see it, I will let you know. But there had been a previous post on Spokane News or something about red light status that attracted a lot of community comments that may or may not have led to the story about a red light status over a weekend. And the conversation was like, should we be telling criminals in the community the jail's on red light status? And then we got a media press the next day. We had a request on.
I know.
Tell them all. We had a request on rebuilding the Skyway Cafe that burned, I think out of Feltz. Nothing came of it, but just letting you all know there was a request there. On KSPS this month is Commissioner French. He interviewed Sheriff Knowles on the drug crisis. Coming up in June is Commissioner Kearns, July, Waldrop, August, Jordan. So we will be getting with you all on getting your guests scheduled and finding reporting dates. On the events front, we have Bear Lake tomorrow. I have Commissioner CUNY, Kearns, and Waldrop as attending. Am I missing anybody? Nope. Okay, I need feedback on the run-up show by the end of business today. If you have any comments, or I could make edits as soon as tomorrow morning if you had any. Liberty Lake, next Wednesday, the sheriff's helicopter, June 4th. And a nice site visit, gonna be some great visuals out of Phelps Field at the hangar for that. And then Newman Lake has now moved back to TBD, waiting on some project updates. Anything there? On the radar for later in the summer or fall, we have Camas Meadow and then State of the County, September 11th. And then other things to know about, we did hear from an energy company that there's gonna be a natural gas pipeline blowdown, so they can do some maintenance on their pipeline. And so we've let some partners in the region know about that. It's happening, I think, May 28th. But I can get more specific information. It's in the valley area.
It is due south of Newman Lake, north of Liberty Lake. Maybe halfway between on Star Road, that's where their facility is now. So they're already doing, the pipeline's already doing a robust, targeted communication with all of the residents in a 1 mile vicinity, which they believe is where the noise will be heard over perhaps a couple of hours, only during I advise them of our noise ordinance, so we're aware of that, but they're doing it and we're just sharing information with our other jurisdictions, so they have awareness as well, shouldn't be any questions, but if you look at the 1 mile vicinity, it's pretty much an incorporated area.
We shared that information with emergency management and Shrek in case there's questions or calls, but.
And they've also been in contact with all of our public safety entities in and around the area that the company is.
One last item I just wanted to mention, and this is for mainly for the chair, but there had been a conversation here about the comprehensive plan and logo. Scott had given some direction that the other logo wasn't approved and needed to be taken down, and so pretty confident that it's been scrubbed. But in terms of a replacement logo, Sharissa has worked up 2 plans. The immediate response was no, thanks. But the board hasn't considered that, so if the board would like to see our treatments, I'd be happy to send them to you. But planning was not a fan of the logos we presented.
Planning to like them. I thought we had some simple changes to theirs.
I think that wasn't my recollection. I think it was go back to the drawing board and work with the communications office on a logo. So we provided the county logo with the words Plan 2046 and Vision 2046 under it, which was the notes I had from the meeting.
We told them to go back, work with the comms team, see if they can come up with something. Yeah,
We said utilize the county's approved logo by the VOCC and enhance that perhaps. Not use theirs. That was my recollection.
I guess I thought it was, as long as it was on the same sheet. We could use theirs, but make sure our logo is there as well, and then kind of update the bottom part to make sure that it was, so. I don't know.
I was hoping it could integrate like our logo with whatever the Vision 2046 or whatever the title of our update is called. Anyway, I'm open to looking at options. I just would love to see the website up so folks can go there and know how to participate in the update. So I mean, we shouldn't let that stop other communication stuff happening.
I don't think he was here that day, were you?
I wasn't here that day and I'm thinking, thank God.
Logos.
I don't think Al was here that day.
I was.
So let's just want to come back.
I'd like to see the word product, if it is something that is desired to be seen.
Yep, I only sent it to the chair so far, but we will circulate it to the board so you can see. Should be very familiar. It's the county logo with those 2 words underneath it.
All right.
That's it for me.
Oh, I was gonna ask, at the 2 p.m., are we considering but we're voting on the ILA, the homeless regional interlocal, right? So I remember you had said you had talked to the city about a joint press release on that.
Yes, the city has reached out and asked if.
I think it would be good to communicate that out to the public, that we've come to we've updated the agreement.
I think it's trying to figure out, I mean, so Pat and I talked about this and we talked a little bit, but I think we're like, they're doing theirs, the Valley's doing theirs, and the Valley's new to doing it. It doesn't, what I don't want is the public feeling like we're all now coordinating everything, because we're not coordinating everything. We're just updating an older agreement and the Valley's not being part of it, and so there's, you know, they're talking, I don't know, I'm not feeling the need to do a joint press release with everything. Cause I mean, cause we need to have the Valley be part of it too, and I think
That's fine. That's what I was assuming. I mean, I just feel like the community's been really wanting the 3 jurisdictions at least, if not all the other small cities, to be working together. And we are working together. We're really coordinating much differently than we did in the past around our grants and our data. So I just think it's important to get the word out. We can do our own news release if we want. I didn't know where those conversations had ended up.
When is the Valley scheduled to vote? Do we know?
I don't know. And I don't know when the city's scheduled to vote either.
Has anyone signed the interlocal yet? Are we the first?
That would be a good question for George. I felt like the city was supposed to go last night, but maybe it's next Monday, because I meet Monday nights.
Sure. I'm happy to do an individual one, saying we're doing this, but I think trying to coordinate with everybody to do it jointly is just, I was not.
That's gonna take like weeks.
Yeah, I mean, because it's gotta be after everyone signs theirs before the press release would happen, so.
Well, if there's not signing till next week, we have a week to put something together, but if we wanna do our own, that's fine. I just wanted to flag that, cause I know you had said the city had reached out, and if you could share the draft with everyone, we could look at it.
Do we, if we're thinking we may do a county one, do we wanna see if like the mayor of the Valley or the mayor of Spokane wanna add a quote to ours or something? That's just a thought. Don't wanna make it too complicated, but even if it's simple steps to coordinate, I think that's good news to share personally, so.
And it tends to be a little hard to get everybody to coordinate together, and so.
Right. I just messaged George. I said, have any of the 3 jurisdictions passed the homeless ILA yet? He says, I think the Valley is doing theirs tonight. The city of Spokane was briefed yesterday.
Okay.
So I don't, their briefing, they usually have a multiple touch thing, so.
It may
City
be
of
a few
Spokane,
months.
City of Spokane, it could be, it could be 2 weeks, then maybe so.
Because it depends if it was briefed at a committee. So if it's a committee, then it's going to be multiple more times if it's briefed at their. What do you call it, their advanced or something.
Their advanced agenda, then
Then
it's.
it'd be next.
Well, we can find that out and then. Circulate the
They're busy
materials
with
and draft.
statutes and stuff.
If we don't like it, we can do our own.
It looks like it's on the city council's agenda for Monday, May 19th. There's an amendment proposed by Councilmember Dillon. So I'm not really sure where that's at.
I would say we would just. go
Better not be.
Amendments, no amendments.
I need to hold off.
Or
on
yeah,
that.
I'd say we need to hold off until everyone signs it. Because I think it's, otherwise, if there's an amendment coming, we have not agreed to the amendment.
It reflects the board's past practice, common practice of you signed the ILA last. So.
Well, then maybe we should.
In the meantime, I'll work with George and I'm happy to circulate with the city and send it.
Please let us know if there's
Yes.
an amendment.
Yeah.
So.
Can somebody call them and see, like, is that legit? Are they
Otherwise-
seriously gonna try to amend this thing before, I mean,
I mean,
if the
otherwise,
Valley's gonna pass it tonight, it's on our agenda today, like,
yeah, I would have us both strike it.
I kind of thought we had kind of a handshake agreement here that, hey, guys, this is going through as.
Scott, I don't know the city's agendas that well. Scott,
And 4 years. Lots changed.
Because yes, once we sign it, we're not signing an amendment unless it has to come back. So I'd rather strike it if they're thinking they're gonna do that. Commissioner French.
Oh, absolutely. I was just gonna say, the question would be, who's on first? meeting.
But typically as the county, we do it last because we want to make sure all the other jurisdictions have done it.
Yep.
Since. We see all that, so. Okay, well,
One quick one. Crab has provided the county Public Works Department another certificate of good practice recognition. So in past years, the board has on their consent agenda under a presentation item done a resolution to recognize our Public Works Department. So if that's something that the board would like to do again, then we can get it on an upcoming agenda.
Crap, we approved it the week before last and it was, all 39 counties complied this time. So that was, yeah. Then for what it's worth, I'll be attending KIB tomorrow, Thursday, Friday. And we're looking for trying to get some more $10 this way.
okay, so we have 2 executive sessions that will take a total of 20 minutes. So we hope to get you out of here by 12:30. So we'll adjourn the meeting for this morning. Well, before we do that, will you state the purposes
They
of
are
executive
both,
session?
both pending and potential litigation under OCW 4230. General, first one should take 5 minutes. Board, myself, Scott Simmons, Mike Sparber, Kyle Tuig, Jim Amacio, Jeff Morris, no action. The other, Dan Gadd, Devin Kurta, Jeff McMorris, along with Scott, myself, and the board, no action, 15 minutes.
So we will be in executive session for 20 minutes. At the end of that 20 minutes, we'll adjourn for the morning. We'll be back for our 2 o'clock and after just so everyone.
We're gonna do the closed session at 2 o'clock.
So we're gonna do the, yeah, just give me a second. So the closed sessions will be after our 2 o'clock meeting, we have 2 closed sessions on. So, just so everyone can plan accordingly to that. So we will. So. we don't-
Closed session.
So, so anyway, so we will adjourn, we will go into executive session for 20 minutes. We will conclude at the end of that, no action is anticipated. And then we'll see everybody back for the 2 o'clock. Thank you. So yes, we'll do the closed sessions after